You sent.
Good
Okay,
call.
ready to roll. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, the Community Preservation Committee for Dayton. Calling to order about 6:12 p.m. We're live and local at prime time. I just have to read some disclaimers and then we'll get rolling. It's a regular meeting dated July 28th, 2022. Once again, prime time, 10:59 Somerset Avenue, Dayton, Massachusetts, 02715, time 6 p.m. Hybrid meeting in person and via Zoom. Join the Zoom meeting. Meeting ID is 85098142485, passcode 408875, phone 1926099 US. This agenda is subject to revision and addition prior to the meeting. Okay, any other disclaimers? What's the other one? The meeting's being recorded. We had some technical things before. We want to make sure that everyone knows it's being recorded, it's live. You can find it on Channel 9 at a later date or via Zoom, via YouTube. And like I say, it's live with Zoom. Okay, call to order we did. Let's please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And a quick committee member introduction. First of all, would you mind telling us who you are and where you came from? This is our new administrative clerk. And I wasn't sure about how to say your last name, so.
Morero.
And she works, how do you talk?
I currently work for the sewer department as the part-time clerk. So I work under Diane Curtis, the office manager. Prior to that, I did fleet operations coordinator for Nestle Waters, formerly known as Poland Spring. I brought copies of my resume.
Oh,
I
nice.
just didn't get it.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, that was sold, so they cut back on employees, and there was 3 of us, and they thought they could go down to 2.
Okay. Does anybody else want to see a resume?
Prior to that, it was Coca-Cola. I was a
Thank
planner
you.
for them as well. Very well familiar with Word, PDF, Excel, all the office programs,
Connectivity.
internet.
How's your
No
connectivity in your
problem.
neighborhood? You're on Milk Street. You
I'm
should be
on Mill
great.
Street, it's perfect.
Thank you so much. That's half the battle.
If I have trouble, I'm 6-minute drive away. That was the question I was gonna ask you.
Why did we ask that?
Yeah.
Because where our previous, it wasn't her fault, but her connectivity. She lived on the Berkeley Taunton line and we had some connectivity problems a lot. So that was one of the things, believe it or not, our tech, Dave Marvell wanted to bring up, which it's important because if you can't be here in person, right, Dave?
Yeah, no, that's what I was gonna ask, like, I watched a couple of the meetings online, and sometimes it's hard to hear what you're saying, or you're talking together.
Yeah.
And it was, I could see it being a little challenging, trying to take notes
Right.
on certain subjects. So, to me, personally, I'd probably would rather come in for the
If
meeting.
you can make it.
No,
in,
that'd be great.
That would be better.
Yeah, I'd rather.
We like to Zoom every meeting because I talked to Mike Mellon about it. It's just easier because if we need it as a backup, like Kevin and I both did, to get some meeting notes and all that, it's a great backup to have. You really don't want to depend on it, but it's very
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, the sewer department, we use a voice recorder because it's not video recorded, so everything's on.
If you want to bring a recorder or something like that, I tried bringing one tonight, but my battery's I'm having a bad night with technology, so.
Okay, so that's an option as well too. Perfect, yeah, because just being closer to a mic would be better as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think whatever helps you
Yeah.
take notes.
take
It's gonna be
notes,
great.
perfect.
Do whatever you gotta do.
We're so happy. Believe me.
And before we move on, do you need a laptop, Elizabeth?
We're gonna do that too.
I
Right?
have one that I could use my own, but
Okay.
it's not like,
We were gonna get a
there'd be
new,
security issues with it, do you know what I mean?
You know what,
It's
we'll
not-
get you a
we're
laptop.
gonna get a new one and a new printer.
There's
It's
something
not,
that's on the agenda.
It's on the.
Oh, I'm
agenda.
sorry, okay, we'll take
Dave,
it.
I put it on because you had mentioned it.
Okay, sorry,
Yeah,
guys.
I would just be concerned about it not being on your server or, it getting hacked into or something crazy and information being released that you want released.
Okay,
So it'd be better to have one from the town.
that's what we're gonna do,
Privacy.
yeah. And they have a little thing where they, it's all, all town. It's all town. You'll have to use be just for town.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Any questions? We're gonna do a real quick intro of the group. Dave Marvell is from Cable, an at-large member. Dan Higgins is from Planning Board Representative. Adele is kind of she's still kind of with us in our heart, but she came from housing. We wanted to come, we're working the house. It's gonna be so good. Mr. Gale, not Gales, Gale is our at-large, and he does quite a ADA, he runs that. Couple other things. He's involved with a lot of stuff. Highly qualified individual. Kevin Smith, Park and Rec, Open Space. He's on ADA, I think, clerk, and other various items. I think I'm on this. And Mr. Fontaine is coming in that could possibly be our rep from housing. He's not sure yet, but could possibly be coming that way. He's retired from Older Fire. And then myself, just Tom Berklin, at large member, I stepped in for chairman, and Tim wanted to take a break, and I signed it up here. Mr. Stu Saginaw, I apologize. This is our introduction. This gentleman came all the way down from the other side of Boston, I believe.
Yep.
Been here before. I'm just gonna turn it over to him. What we're having is a CPC from the coalition in Boston. Education and training to get us a baseline, get us back up to speed. We kind of went through a transition. We have a lot of new people, and that's where we're at.
So we're gonna get our brothers Eckerson.
And Mr. Eckerson, I'm sorry, I don't see your face. You're live on your, thanks for coming on your vacation.
It's there.
Dave Eckerson is our vice chairman and also the financial officer, who oversees the finances with the town account.
He's waving hello right now.
Most of the people here already know that it was plus 20 last night, but.
We do. It's good to mention that. Yes, so she's basically official. So she's, this will be her first note-taking event, I just so. Okay, we're gonna turn it over to you, sir.
All right. Well, thank you all for having me. Pardon the mask, I'm visiting an elderly relative this weekend, and I promised her I would be really careful this week. So, but I project pretty loudly, so can folks hear me pretty well?
Yes, sir.
For you, all right, great. So my name is Stuart Saginaw. I'm from the Community Preservation Coalition. And both Mike and Tom and Kevin thought it would be a good idea for me to come down and kind of do just a refresher training, a much shorter version of the training that we did many years ago when you guys formed your CPC, but I think it was almost all different people back then. So always good to get a little refresher on CPA. And I'll tell you quickly about our organization. We're a nonprofit based in Boston. We are not the state of Massachusetts. So I work for the Community Preservation Coalition. We have a steering committee with representatives from all these different communities. And we're a traditional nonprofit that advocates on your behalf at the State House and also does trainings and education and CPA newsletters and website and things like that. All the typical things that, for lack of a better term, a municipal trade association would do. Whoever's on the ConsCom here, there's MACC, does lobbying and education for them. There's MMA for the selectmen. There's even a moderators association and a lawyers association. So we're the association for all the communities in the state that has CPA, and particularly the community preservation committees. That's who we like to deal with. That actually right there is Chase Mack, our communications director, right there. Chase is campaigning there in Milton on their election day last year with his wife, actually, holding signs. They did pass CPA in Milton. We are hiring an associate director this fall. We had someone leave during the pandemic, so we're going to have a third person in the coalition. And then there's 21 members on that steering committee that help guide the operation of the coalition. I want to point out our website to everyone. If you haven't been there, it is chock full of information on CPA. Communitypreservation.org is the website address. Dave, can you hear us? You can give me a thumbs up or something. If you can hear me, I just want to make sure you're able to hear what I'm saying. This website has been around for 20 years. We've updated it many times. It looks nice and clean, but actually behind it, I don't think we've ever taken anything off this website. There is a ton of information that's really well organized. Anything you'd ever want to know about CPA is on this website particularly on this tab right here. This is kind of the tab for you as a community preservation committee member. It's called technical assistance. You open up this large menu, and then each of these links organized by topic areas, open space, recreation, housing, for you folks, has probably 30, 40 more articles on every little facet of CPA and how it's used in those examples. There's success stories from other communities. There's tons of CPA news on the website, so we definitely urge you to use that as a resource. You will not find anything on CPA on the state of Massachusetts website. There is not one person in the whole Commonwealth who works for the state that has CPA in their job title. They consider it to be a local program. So consequently, we sort of step into the breach to be answering questions on CPA. And CPA has grown pretty large since the time we adopted. There have been lots of other communities, and it's now in over half the cities and towns in the state. But we've had a lot of cities come in as of late as well. So actually, we're up to 65% of the citizens of Massachusetts live in a CPA community. Because we have had Boston and Springfield and Pittsfield, Holyoke, Chelsea, Fall River, New Bedford, Fall River's in the program, all adopt recently. So the number of people living in CPA communities has definitely increased. And anyone who's ever entered this program, municipality, none have ever left. And there is an option. You can revoke CPA at any time after you have had it for a minimum of 5 years, but you're long past the 5-year point. But every community that's ever had the program has really found it incredibly useful. It's only reached the ballot to revoke 3 times in Northampton, Hingham, and Sturbridge were the 3, and it was defeated like 80-20 overwhelmingly in all 3 places. So it is as you have probably experienced yourself, a really terrifically valuable program for your community to do things that you would ordinarily not be able to do. And the interest in it is still expanding. These little stars here are the 6 communities that are voting on CPA in November. So there might be 6 new communities, and Worcester is one of those stars. So that's a pretty important election. The others are smaller. Let's see if I can do it. Shelburne, Westboro, Natick, Boylston, Burlington, and Worcester. Those are the ones that are voting on CPA in the fall. And Lakeville, just down the road, adopted CPA in the spring, and I'm actually going there in a few weeks to do a training for their CPA community. So any way you look at CPA, whether you look at that map or you look at the statistics of what's been done with the program, it's been a huge success. There's been over 14,000 projects, and you add up all the money between the local money that you received from Dayton and all the other communities, and then the state matching money, and it adds up to over $2.65 billion. So it's a pretty large program at this point. And it's been able to do tremendous things in all these different areas, as you have experienced here. And this is clearly the hottest area of CPA, the outdoor recreation area, because there were some changes that we advocated for at the State House back in 2012 that made it a lot more useful for recreation projects. And the number of projects in that category has really exploded since that time. So lots of parks, playgrounds, and athletic fields. And I think you guys just did an appropriation for a park, right? That would not have been possible before 2012 with CPA. We had to go to the legislature. It took us 5 years, actually, to convince them to allow communities to rehabilitate existing municipally owned land into parks. Before, you could just buy land for new parks or build brand new ones, but you couldn't fix up. Is that fixing up an existing park that you're going to be doing?
No, it is new. It's been absent for 15 years. There was a place.
Was a park there, yeah. So, yeah, you needed that legislation to be able to bring that park back on that land. So, so you're a perfect example of, so 3,001 projects funded in the recreation category. Yes. Oh, I should have mentioned, ask questions along the way. This is much better if we do it interactively.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to interact.
Yeah, sorry, I always mention that, but I like doing it that way because it makes more sense for you folks to be able to ask.
Okay.
I'm sure you're gonna get into how CPC funds can be used.
Yes.
But just based upon it, I'm just curious, so it is specific, you say outdoor recreation, it's not something you could use to, I'm not sure, we don't have an example of indoor project that I'm aware of, but it is specific to outdoor.
Yeah, it has to be outdoors because there's actually definitions of all these, like, what does it mean to be historic? Well, there's actually a definition. what level of affordability, 80% of the area by mean income, there's definitions for all these different things. And recreation is actually part of the definition of open space. It's actually a subset, and it's all the things that you would think of as open areas, fields, forests, farmlands, parks, community gardens, trails, athletic fields. So it actually specifically says no buildings or structures. So when it comes to recreation, it's for outdoor recreation only. So great question. All right, so let's quickly talk about the Community Preservation Committee. And there, you guys have been around for a little while, but for those of you who are new, there are really not a long list of things that you have to do, but they're very concentrated in a few areas. So one thing you are required to do is hold a public hearing every year and get input from the public on what the priorities of the public are with regards to open space, historic preservation, and affordable housing. You have to advertise that in a newspaper, and that's it. It doesn't say when you do it. It doesn't say, what the format is. It's all up to you, but you do have to do that once a year. And then hopefully you do have a community preservation plan that was done originally, and that just needs a light update every year. So if you keep a log of all your projects that you've done, obviously you're going to add the new projects. If you get a check from the state, you're going to put that in your plan.
So I have a quick question, and
Yeah.
doing some reading about those two subjects in particular. Now, the public hearing and the plan, it's really our job, so like myself as the parks representative,
Right.
planning rep, housing reps, we should be bringing our information to that meeting, correct, and sharing it, but I need to address, this is the needs of parks, this is the needs of planning, open space, whatever it is.
Correct.
But that's the time and place to do that and carry it into the community preservation
Yes.
plan, correct?
Yeah, again, it's not specific to that, but that is the way most communities do it, is prior to the public hearing, you go back and meet with your parks board and say, hey, I'm going to the public hearing for CPA. What are some things that you want me to bring up? Like we got to renovate, the softball field has got really bad and we need to do some drainage work there. We don't have enough outdoor basketball courts, whatever it is, you're going to get that priority. And same thing from the housing authority. You will talk to the other housing authority commissioners. What are the possibilities for getting new affordable housing built, things like that. And then you bring those to the public hearing the same way that the public comes too. And frankly, you don't get a ton of people from the public usually at these hearings. So it is good that each of you are going to your own boards and bringing back priorities, because that might be the extent of the input you get.
And it's just the law for that is still, it needs to be published in a newspaper,
It
correct?
still does.
Right.
Each of 2 weeks prior to the hearing.
And obviously, we by all means use social media and other outlets to promote it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can charge that newspaper cost to your administrative fund. You don't want to make the town pay for that. Their budget's pretty tight, so that's what you have your administrative fund for.
Stu, if I can ask you here, and I may be jumping ahead, but for anything that we want to consider, whether it's for housing or public space or recreation, whatever, and it might be some ADA related. So if we're looking at anything ADA related or housing related, can we potentially, are we allowed to approve something, I'll ask both questions at the same time, that is over several years and can be matched with other grants, or can only be approved if it's matched with other types of grants? So for example, if we wanted to look at something related to affordable housing or handicap housing, disability housing, over a 10-year period, for example, let's just say $150,000 a year for 10 years. Can we do that, and then can we make it contingent upon certain funds from other sources or specific sources being matched or percentage values to do that, or are we not allowed to do something like that?
So I'll take the second one first, because that's the one that's a yes. So, when you guys recommend a project, town meeting can't vote on a project unless you vote for it and recommend it here in the CPC. You can attach whatever conditions you want to that project, So some communities say the project has to be completed within 3 years, because they've had just municipal projects just drag on forever. So they started putting a condition on it when they made the recommendation, said funds to be expended by December 31st, 2025. So you can put whatever conditions you want, and making it contingent upon other funds being raised is absolutely something that folks do.
Good.
So you can do that. I would just say, be generic in that. You know, rather than saying 50,000 from a state grant, say with 50,000 in other funds to be raised by X date. Because you never know, you know, they might not qualify for that, but they might do a private fundraising. You know, the goal is not to lock them in to a method, but it's to the amount, you know, that you want to match from. So that is possible. The first one, where you make a grant and spend it over a number of years, that is not possible. And that's not a CPA rule, that's a town rule. Like, you can't bind the actions of town meeting on the next year's town budget. So if you say, we're gonna give you 100,000 a year for the next 10 years, you know, you might all be replaced on the CPC next year, and you've now tied their hands. So that can't be done, except if you do it by bond. So if you bond against future CPA revenues, then you're committing to $1 million, you know, over the next 10 years. And that can be paid out immediately, or you can put a condition on it that 100,000 is released. But that's the only way to do that, is to bond. The other way is, if you have all the money, you can appropriate it all at once and put one of your conditions on it that they can only get 100,000 every year. But you would have to have $1 million in the bank to do that. So you can't promise that the CPC is going to recommend a certain amount every year for the next 10 years, because that's a different CPC, and that's a different town meeting that would have to approve that. And that works that way for municipalities too. You know, when someone asks that question, I always joke that if there's someone who works for the town in the room, you know, they actually don't have much job security, because every town employee is really only a town employee for 1 year until town meeting approves the budget to pay them for the next year, right? There's no promise
So,
that town meeting is gonna approve that budget next year.
so for example, we potentially have and I'll explain what I mean when I say this, we have a new library,
Uh-huh.
okay? But the new library is going to be in a building, which is an historical building.
Okay.
For many, I don't know how far back it goes, or maybe.
It's being rehabbed into a library, adaptive reuse, they call it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for that, for example, if they were to come to us, that might be something that we consider bonding.
Yeah, if you wanted to, let's say, add ADA access or something like that, or do some additional historic preservation work on the building,
Yes.
absolutely, you could do that through the funds you have on hand. You could bond against your future revenue stream for that, or you could do a combination. We say, you know, with 100,000 to come from our historic reserve this year and 900,000 to be bonded for the next 10 years. Yeah, have you ever bonded for a project?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so in the same way the town bonds against its future tax revenue stream to buy a new fire truck or to build a new school, you can bond against your future CPA revenue stream.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So, you know how the money comes down, sometimes it's nice and sometimes it's thin.
You're talking about
It
the
depends.
state match?
When it comes down to the match, but I noticed like the legislature's
I think
trying,
that might be the next slide, actually.
I'll just shut up now.
Okay,
Can I just ask? I have a
Sorry.
technical question.
Go ahead,
I don't know
Dan.
what Kevin had asked. So the public hearing, in terms of projects being brought forward, were you saying, or were you implying that, let's say, it's a historical project, that it can only come into the board for recommendation?
No.
No.
Pretty much approve it, or no?
No.
No,
I just thought that was the most appropriate time to
Okay.
kind of air out what everyone
Right,
needs,
sorry.
and then you forecast
Yeah.
what's like our capital outlay.
That's actually commonly misunderstood. There is no requirement that you have a public hearing to present your slate of projects and your recommendations to the public. That is not a requirement. It's actually the opposite. The public hearing happens at the beginning of the process to get an input on what are the priorities of the community, what things do they want you to be thinking about. Some communities do have a public hearing before town meeting to say, you know, we want to present our slate of recommendations to you. We want to talk about the projects, answer any questions you have, save time at town meeting, you know, to answer and do that ahead of time. But that is not a requirement. All right, so we're talking about the money next, and we are jumping exactly into what Tom asked about. So your CPA program has really 3 funding sources, but 2 main funding sources. Your local surcharge, when the voters in Dayton approve CPA, they basically voted themselves a 1% voluntary tax increase. And that's called the local surcharge revenue. And that comes in every year when people pay their taxes. And then every November 15th, the magic of CPA is that you get a match from the state. But that match does vary. We're going to talk about that in a second. You also earn interest on any money that's sitting in your account. The town calculates that, and they should be paying that every summer when they close the books. Whatever money is attributable to what you had sitting in the town coffers should be paid into your fund. That has not been much of a funding source over the past decade or so, but it's going to start to be a little bit more. Now, if you have $500,000 sitting there all year that you haven't used, that's in your reserve accounts, the town is earning interest on that a little bit. They haven't invested with the other town cash, and they just have to calculate how much of that interest is attributable to you. And so at the end of the fiscal year, actually this summer, you want to just make sure that's happening. Make sure that the town does know that.
That's our Dave.
Okay,
Dave's the man.
great. All right, that was
Right
for
now.
you. That was for you, Dave.
Well, everybody.
All right, so now to Tom's question, the statewide trust fund. So you get a match every November from the state CPA trust fund. And it is a true trust fund, but it doesn't come from the state budget. The vast majority of the money comes from a fee that was added onto filings at the registries of deeds in Massachusetts. So when Paul Salucci, the governor in 2000, signed CPA, there was a surcharge put on top of every document at the registry of deeds. So if you go to the registry when you buy a house and you record a mortgage and you record your title and you might record a trust or an order of conditions from the conscom, whatever is recorded at the registry, there's a price on a little chart that you pay to the state. Most of it goes to the general fund, but $50 of every document that's filed goes to the CPA trust fund. It used to be $20, but we advocated for 10 years to get that done. But in 2019, they did increase it to $50. Municipal lien certificates are less. They used to be 10, now they're 20. So that's where the vast majority of the money from the trust fund, it comes from these $50 and $25 from municipal lien certificates at the registry of deeds. Someone gonna ask a question?
Is it 1% then? That's what, where's that 1%? Is that what?
That's your local piece.
Oh, that's a local.
That's the local piece. 1% of your tax base goes to your local surcharge,
Does
and
that
then you
include,
get the money.
does that include local business tax as well? Or just,
It does, commercial, industrial, and residential.
All right.
Yeah, but it's on the property value.
Yeah.
We had a question, Stu, when it was brought up. We had a meeting, myself and Dave went to, we got a new town accountant already, another one. So we got an interim, but David raised a question, which if someone puts a lien on a property until the thing is sold, then we would get our money. Something like that, she was trying to explain.
Yeah, that I don't know the answer to.
Dave was.
Yeah, that's definitely a question for your accountant. Actually, not your accountant, that would be your assessor.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be the assessor, because they actually are the ones that put the assessment of the CPA surcharge on the bill, and then the tax collector actually collects it. So I don't know the answer to that question. It's a good one, but I don't know the answer to that. All right, so this trust fund is actually a true trust fund. It's held at the Department of Revenue, and that money goes right from the window at the registry to the CPA trust fund. It is not subject to appropriation by the legislature. It automatically is paid out. The only thing that can happen with that money is pay as a match to the 189 CPA communities every November 15th. Last year, the match was 43.8%. And when we say match, when we say percentages, which is how we always talk about the trust fund, we're talking about the percentage of what you raised locally. So if a community raised $100,000 from their CPA local surcharge, they got a check for $43,800 from the trust fund. If they're like Boston and they raised $20 million, they got a $4.3 million check. So everyone got the same 43.8%. But it's of what they collected locally. So we have a tiny little community in CPA, Gosnell, which raises $5,000 a year from CPA. They got whatever 43.8% of 5,000 is. Anyone know what Gosnell is, by the way?
Oh,
Cutting Hunk,
It's an island right off by the.
bingo, very
Really?
good.
oh,
It's, there's actually Martha's Vineyard, there's Nantucket, there's Martha's Vineyard, and then there's this little thin island chain called the Elizabethan Islands. The only one that is populated is Cutting Hunk on the end. There's 50 people that live there year round. The Forbes family owns most of the other islands, they're private people.
let me ask you, though, since you said that these fees are based on all of the filings.
Yep.
And it's $50 per. The more communities that join,
Yes,
the values go down.
absolutely. Yep, and that's what we're gonna talk about right now. Did you have, you want to say?
Gosnell students, I don't know if it's still like that, at the time of my children were in high school, Gosnell students could be into Dayton High School. Dayton High
Oh,
School.
really?
The reason I knew it is because one of my daughter's friends.
Yeah, I actually went over there. They do have a little school building, but it's the same little building for K through 12. I think they have like 3 students or something like that. Maybe the rest go off island. So that's why the trust fund had dropped, it actually dropped almost to the single digits, the match, because of that exact thing you're talking about. It was 2 things. The registry had fallen, the receipts had fallen because the real estate market is much cooler than it was back in, let's say, 2004. So the receipts had fallen, but the number of CPA communities had gone up. So therefore, the match had gone down. And that's why we started advocating for them to increase the fee. Because in the beginning, there were 40 communities in CPA, now there are 189. So the slices of the pie are getting a lot thinner. And it took quite a while, but that message did finally get through in the legislature. And that's why the match went from almost the single digits to 43.8 last year, which is a terrific match.
So with that being said, you probably want to be, if you're a community that doesn't locally raise a large amount of money, you probably have to be really careful with taking that bond approach because you're not sure what your max is.
Actually, no, because when you bond against your CPA revenue stream, what's called bond counsel, there's a law firm that examines all the details of your bond.
What's it called, bond counsel?
Bond counsel. Yep, your town has a municipal lawyer and then they have a bonding lawyer that makes sure everything's copacetic with the bond. They will only let you bond what you can pay back out of your local money.
Okay.
The state money goes up and down. They know that. It's an unreliable funding source. It's gravy on top. So they won't let you bond more than they know you can pay back.
Okay.
From the local surcharge. Yep. All right, so we're looking at about perhaps a 40% match for this year, maybe a little higher. One of the things we do is we try to supplement those deeds fees when they get low. And right now, the registry fees have dramatically slowed down this year. The amount of houses being sold and interest rates have gone up, so no one's refinancing anymore. Every refinancing, is a new $50 fee when they file that refinancing paperwork. So the collections have really slowed down. So we lobby the legislature for money from the state's budget surplus. And in 7 of the last 9 years, we've gotten allocations as high as 25 million. I think the lowest we got was 10 million. And we did it again this year. And just a few weeks ago, the legislature approved another $20 million for the CPA trust fund. However, as I was driving down here today, the governor came out with his signature on the budget and his vetoes. And I actually found out, almost turned right around and told you I wasn't coming. We have a little work to do tonight, tomorrow at the legislature. He actually sent back the CPA portion. And when he sent it back, he said, I fully support this and I want to give CPA 20 million. But that same surplus funding source has always given a similar amount to the state's life sciences program. So I'm sending that section back and asking the legislature to amend it and give, actually he only asked for 10 million this year for life sciences. So tomorrow we have to do a little bit of advocacy work at the legislature to make sure that the House and Senate, by the stroke of midnight on Sunday when their session ends, that they take action on that. So that is still up in the air at this point.
Do you lobby up there?
Yes, I'm a registered lobbyist. I only lobby on CPA though.
Okay, yeah.
I don't deal with any other issues.
We know it too.
Yeah, it's me. And our steering committee helps too. All those people on our steering committee, they
Okay.
work for other organizations and they go talk about housing issues. And our Mass Audubon is on our steering committee. They go talk about open space issues and recreation issues as well. So they're a part of it as well.
Just so we can get an idea of how much that is. 20 million represents what percentage of the normal CPA?
Yep, the trust fund, oh, actually, I think it's on, yeah, this slide right here. You guys are like soothsayers. You know what slides are coming next. All right, so here's how much the trust fund brings in just from the fees, not from the surplus funds that we get. So this is the last year under the old fee, when it was $20 and $10, the trust fund brought in about $23 million. The first year we just completed last October, where the new fees were in place for 12 full months, trust fund brought in $82 million. So you can see the dramatic impact that had on the trust fund. I will say we benefited here from the real estate market really went crazy during COVID. People were refinancing at a rapid clip because they knew rates were going to go up. There was a lot more real estate activity as people were able to move out into all different parts of the state, and work remotely. This has definitely slowed down since then, which is why the match, I think, will be a little less this year. Last year, we got 10 million in the state budget surplus. That's why we asked for 20 million this year, because the fees have slowed down a little bit. And so we said we want to get communities as close as possible to the match they had last year, to that 43.8, and about 20 million will do that. Will bring us over 40%. So that's the essence of the trust fund. Any questions on the trust fund? That's the best part of CPA, honestly. I mean, you could always go to town meeting and ask for money to build that park, right? But to get a 43.8% discount on whatever you spend, if you're spending $250, the state's paying 43.8% of that, when you build that park, and your local money's paying the rest.
Well,
So,
could I ask you a question on Seacom, if you're familiar?
yeah,
A little over 2 million they dropped on that farm.
Madero's Farm, yeah,
Now,
they bonded.
they got a lot of money in, because they have a lot of business. I don't know how they have that much money, but they have a lot more.
Yeah, I'd have to look and see what percentage they adopted after.
That was quite a project.
I'm thinking they might have adopted at 3%, which is
Okay.
3 times as big, and they're a bigger community than you too.
Right. I just found it
And they
interesting.
bonded, so they didn't have that money in the bank either,
Okay,
but they bonded for that.
I was curious how they did.
Yep. Yeah, we have actually a success story on our website about that project, a long write-up with all the details and the contract and everything, all the back paperwork, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so you guys do a budget every year at Springtown meeting, the same time the town does its regular budget. It does require, and hopefully you guys are doing this, where you have to vote to recommend that budget to town meeting. And the budget is comprised, you have to come up with a top dollar level, right? You have to know what your revenue is before you can allocate it to different things. And so the total budget in CPA is that local money plus the state money. You could actually do an estimate on interest and put that in your budget too. No one does that because it's really a small amount, but technically that is legal. The CPA, like I said, the state considers this to be a local program. So there's not a lot of stuff in this act that says you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. But there is one in terms of the money. And what the act says is every year you must spend or reserve for later spending 10% of your total estimated money in each of these 3 categories. So your total revenues, I think, are somewhere around 125,000. So you put $12,500 in your housing reserve, $12,500 in your open space reserve, and $12,500 in your historic reserve. And that's a good way to do it. You can also have projects that are at least $12,500 in each of the 3 categories. And that would qualify you because the rule is spend or reserve, but you don't have projects every year in every single category. And the projects might be more or less than the 10%. So just putting the money in, the 10% right off the top is definitely a smarter way to do it. Then you have a paper trail, a town meeting vote that you fulfilled that obligation to do that 10%. And
Yeah, could I,
optional, but everyone does it, you can set aside up to 5% of your revenue to the administrative fund, which can be used for, paying you, the meeting minutes, paying dues to our organization, which we appreciate. That keeps us running. Any other due diligence you have to do, that's what the administrative fund is for.
Do we automatically pay yours? And what percentage?
I just got it in the mail, actually.
Yep, it's not automatic, it is absolutely voluntary. So when the fiscal year begins, we send out an invitation to join the coalition. We're very lucky that 99.9% of the communities are willing to support us, but it's 100% voluntary, and it's up to you folks to decide whether you want to do it each year.
So is there a standard, I'm just curious.
Yep. That's an amount?
A standard amount.
Yep.
Percentage you
We
recommend.
have-
Exactly. So how much is it? $87.
$875, it went up.
$75. So the way it works is, we have 10 different categories of dues. So we lump the communities together by the size of their revenue, by how much money they get from CPA. And then everyone pays the same percentage of that revenue. I think it's something like 0.06% roughly, or 0.05 to 0.08, something like that. So that, you're paying the same percent of what you raise locally as Cambridge or Boston does, which raise many other times. So you're in the, whatever category, well, I know what it is. It's the category of communities with dues, with local revenue between 100,000 and 250,000. That category of dues are.
Has the contract in the past contributed?
Yes, we have. Yep, even a great.
And maybe Dave does this, is that purely within our discretion, or that's never been asked at a meeting? Like, we're gonna give it to-
No, you do the administrative budget.
Comes out of our budget.
Yeah,
So
you don't have to tell them exactly what you're spending that budget on, you just ask town meeting to appropriate, I think you do
We
$5,000.
do $5,000.
$5,000, you do a set amount rather than exactly 5%. So you don't have to tell them exactly, sometimes you don't know ahead of time what things are gonna come up during the year that you might need, so. It just allows you to ask for that amount, and then you folks decide by vote, we wanna spend it on,
Yeah, we do professional, technical, we do such,
might need an appraisal.
the clerk,
piece of land.
administrative. Good.
Well, yeah, I got a quick question, so.
Yeah.
The administrative 5%.
Yep.
So we've been, we all know that that's been normal, we've done that every
$5,000.
year, $5,000.
Yeah.
Say last year with our old clerk, we haven't bought any supply computers or any of that stuff. Should we be reallocating a surplus from that account back into the flexible every year?
Happens automatically.
It's automatic.
So that's the only account that you have that at the end of the year, the town automatically takes from you everything that's left and puts it in your CPA fund balance.
Okay.
It doesn't go into the town's general coffers. The town's money, general revenue, and CPA never mix. But they are required by the Department of Revenue to, if you only spend, $2,000, they're required to sweep that $3,000 into your fund balance, and then town meeting authorizes a new administrative account. So it's only for that fiscal year.
And we are gonna be hooking up with Chase for the DOR reporting.
Yeah, there was another report where every project you pass at town meeting has to be entered in the state database. They don't provide any technical support on that, so Chase, our communications director, is gonna work with Tom to get that done, because you've never done it before. I think probably Tim did that in the past or something.
Did that pretty much everything.
Yeah, so he's happy to help you with that. And then the rest of the budget, whatever projects are coming your way, there's no requirement that you do anything else in a particular category. There's no requirement that you spend all your money every single year. It all stays within that CPA fund available to you to make recommendations in future years. All right, so now let's talk about what you can do with this money. This is the last big section I have in terms of training for you tonight. Because this is the hardest part, is what exactly qualifies for CPA spending. And you think it's easy because we all know the 4 categories, right? CPA is a restricted fund. It can only fund things in open space, historic preservation, recreation, and housing. Well, the first question is, what does it mean to be historic? Like, can you just say, oh, this building's historic? No, there's definitions for all those words, and they're in section 2 of the CPA legislation. A copy of the legislation on our website. It's not a bad read. It's only 17 pages. I wouldn't make you do it late at night. But if you're going to read any part of CPA, read section 2, because it's in any piece of legislation, the definitions are first, and that's where the rubber meets the road. Is what does it actually mean to be, a historic resource? The definition is Has to be a building, structure, vessel, meaning a boat, real property, document, or artifact. Has to be on the state register, or the historic commission has to deem it significant in the history, culture, architecture, or archaeology. Tom's got the law right there.
We had an event with Kevin's outfit, they had a firecracker thing.
That is great.
So
That
we
is
set up,
awesome.
we set up a booth, and then we had this on display. It was my first time having a booth, because it was the second year, so we had a little thing where people walked up and they were able,
That's
they
great.
could have even filled out an application if they wanted.
Yeah, that's the definition section right there. That's perfect.
Okay.
So.
So get everybody a copy of that.
Yeah, by the way, this is called the CPA allowable uses chart. This is the simplified version. There's an official DOR version, which has all these definitions actually in the boxes, which you can get on our website, or you can get the simplified version. And it's a good thing to have. I mean, I even went into one CPC once and they had it on a piece of foam core blown up, and they put it on, on a wall. And at every meeting that they have this with them as they were looking at different projects. Another CPC always plunks one down in the middle of the table at the beginning of any meeting. This is kind of the chart that really helps you figure out what you can do with your money. If you're a real CPA geek like me, you'll pull one up and you put it in the back of your pocket, and when you're shopping at Stop and Shop, someone stops you and says, "Hey, you're on the CPC. Can we put a handicap ramp on the new library building?" You'll have the answer on this chart. All right, so it should be fairly easy, right? Because we have 4 categories here. Well, a lot of people don't realize is we also have these verbs that come into play. And you have to be able to describe every line item in the budget for a project by one of these verbs. So you have to be acquiring something, creating something, preserving it, supporting, and or rehabilitating it. And as you can see, not every verb is available in every category. Some of them make sense. You can't create something historic, right? That one makes sense. I love that. The legislature did a good job on that piece. It makes perfect sense. When you're looking at a project, it's really important to look at the budget for the project, not a description. We're going to renovate a park, or rehabilitate a park. That's not going to tell you if it's eligible or not. Even specific things are not going to tell you. It's the budget. It's the line items in a budget for a project. A lot of times you can't get an exact budget because they haven't put it up to bid yet. That's fine. Estimates are good. And you have to look line item by line item in that budget. And you have to find a box where you can stuff that expense. If you can't find a box on this chart that says yes for that particular expense, it is not eligible for CPA funding. Every expense in a project has to be justified by one of these boxes on the chart where it says yes. So let's give a couple of examples of how you would use this chart. The Conservation Commission comes to you and says, we have an opportunity to buy a wonderful piece of conservation land that is contiguous to a piece we already own. We really want to do it. We're applying for CPA funds to buy that piece of conservation land. Okay? And it's $175,000. Well, that's open space, right? Open space is conservation land. Recreation, by the way, is active recreation, parks, playgrounds, athletic fields, outdoor sports courts, things like that, trails, community gardens. Open space is conservation land. Well, what is that project doing? What is that $175,000 going to go toward? It's going to go toward acquiring a piece of land. And absolutely, in fact, that's where 95% of the open space projects are done, is in this box right here, acquiring a piece of conservation land. Okay, now let's say someone comes to you and says, we have the historic library building and we want to do some work on that to bring it back to its former glory and make it handicap accessible. If you read the definition of rehabilitation in section 2, it actually says you can rehabilitate historic buildings by bringing them up to any code that's necessary. Accessibility, plumbing, electrical, the whole idea is to make those buildings, function, because you won't get a building permit unless you take out the knob and tube wiring in an old building.
I think in 2018, that's what we did with the Winslow Davis example.
Okay, perfect.
Stu, can I ask you?
Yeah.
Just want to do quick, I'm thinking something popped in my head when you was talking about that. Isn't there a federal guideline also for historical that ties into this state and local stuff?
Yes, it's actually a state No, you federal government, you're right. When you do work in the historic category, everything that's done has to adhere to the Secretary of Interior standards for historic rehabilitation. And there's a whole page on our website just about the Secretary standards. And it's not a 700-page legally filled red tape document. It's actually one page and it's 10 sentences. And they're just common sense things, like if the building is made out of wood.
Hello there. I've
okay,
just lost audio on the Zoom.
in a historic building. If the building has significant architectural features, like it's town hall and it's got a big tower with a clock in it, you're not gonna take that tower off. You're gonna have to repair that tower. You can't just say, it's too expensive to fix, we're just gonna take it off the building and patch the roof. You can't do that if you're using CPA money. A lot of towns wanna take shortcuts, they don't wanna repair the beautiful historic windows that they have. They want to put in vinyl replacement windows because they're less expensive and they're more energy efficient. The town can do that, but they should use their own money for that. You have CPA and you have this additional funding, so you can do it right. So you can do proper historic preservation. And those are the standards that you use, the Secretary of Interior standards for historic rehabilitation. And you'll see the definition of rehabilitation actually says, with regards to historic preservation, all work shall comply with the Secretary of Interior standards for historic preservation. So another great example of why the rubber meets the road in section 2 of those definitions. Probably about a page and a half. Yeah.
So can I bring up a comment here on Zoom?
Rehabilitate and or restore, in the case of the storage.
Yeah.
It says yes, but the plans that town of Dayton is looking at to possibly use CPA funds is to take a historic building and repurpose it into something other than what it was. Is that still okay?
Absolutely, that's rehabilitate. You're rehabilitating that building for a new use. The Secretary of Interior standards do say that new uses should be, I forget how they word it, but comparable to the old use. So if it's a old town hall, you're not gonna gut everything in there and turn it into a basketball gymnasium or a swimming pool, right? So it's gotta be a use that doesn't require you to ruin the historic character of the building. So a compatible use, they call it. This is kind of the express version of the training. I don't have all the pretty pictures of other projects that I usually use, but we show an example of a former town library in Cohasset that's now 2 units of affordable housing. If you look at it from the outside, it looks just like it always has looked with the library.
I think I have a question, but I think your gentleman on the phone had a comment or a question as well.
That David.
Dave.
Hi, Dave.
I couldn't hear him.
Oh.
Good hear.
Hello there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to put it out there to my fellow committee members that maybe someone could, and this may be beyond the scope of tonight's meeting, but maybe someone who was on the committee at the time could just mention how we were able to justify the proposed Lincoln Village project, given the big red no in the lower right corner of that chart.
You say Lincoln Village?
Yes. Yes.
That's housing.
Yeah.
And that, I just found out today that that's being worked, finally finished. Those transformers. Is that what
Right.
you're talking about, Dave?
I'm raising the question of how we were able to justify that in light of the big red no in the lower right corner of this chart.
Well, what was the work to do?
There was 2 transformers for the, right?
Yeah, they had to bring those and then they would do these panels and that was when it was before that. That was in 2018.
Were they old and unsafe? Were they
Yeah.
dangerous?
and
Right,
it's
okay.
unsafe.
So the answer to that question, Dave, is you can't rehabilitate existing affordable housing. So that would be putting in new kitchens or painting the hallways or, any renovation work. But you can do work that preserves an affordable housing unit. And so preserve, the definition, has a definition, protecting the building from injury, harm, or destruction. So if you have outdated transformers or outdated electrical boxes that are dangerous, that is protecting the building from injury, harm, or destruction. That's done in this box. But if they ask you for, buying new refrigerators for all 63 units, that doesn't help protect the building from injury, harm, or destruction in any way. That would be a rehabilitation, that would not be eligible. Does that make sense, Dave?
Yeah, I mean,
I think.
yeah, I mean, I think it's water over the dam now because town meeting did approve it, but I just think it's could be a very fine distinction in some cases.
It definitely is. It's a nuance. You know, this trips people up a lot and, you know, I'll be honest, this is answering questions about the allowable usage chart is probably 80% of the technical assistance we do. So we can always kind of help you step through those and figure those out. But that one would definitely be there aren't a lot of projects that fall under preserve, but that would be a classic one where you had dangerous electrical. Another one would be putting a sprinkler system in an affordable housing complex, you know, because that would protect the building from injury, harm, or destruction. There aren't a lot of examples, but that one is definitely an example.
Could you, sorry, I'm cutting a bit, give a definition of support?
Yeah, I was wondering about that too.
So yeah, why is support no,
Yeah.
and only yes in the housing category? Believe it or not, the original act in 2000 actually didn't even have a definition for support. Most of these words have definitions. Create still doesn't, but I think everyone knows what create is. But support did not have a definition. And that was resulting in a lot of confusion. Some town councils were saying, no, you can't do this, only in housing. No, you can't do this. Other town council was saying, yes, you can do this. So the legislature in that 2012 legislation that made those changes to recreation, there were about 17 different changes to CPA. They actually put a definition of support in the legislation. And what it means is I don't know the definition exactly off the top of my head, but it's any activity that helps make the housing unit more affordable. So, classic example is rental assistance. That's where you would justify having a rental assistance program where you're helping people that earn less than 80% of the area-wide median income pay their rent if they're having difficulties. You're supporting them in making their monthly housing payment less. Down payment assistance, if you were helping people to buy their first home who are income eligible, under 80% of the area income, and you wanted to give them down payment assistance, that is making the housing unit more affordable. So that's the definition. The bigger question that people ask is why no, and then yes, right? Okay, so two reasons for that. The first is the no is, you know, municipalities never have a lot of extra money. Budgets are always tight. CPA comes along and communities can adopt up to 3% of additional municipal revenue. There's always going to be pressure on taking that money for lots of other things, right? And so this verb, which didn't have a definition at all, they didn't want communities moving their entire Parks and Recs maintenance budget over to CPA in that category. It was just too tempting a spot for municipalities to kind of raise the CPA fund. And then you wouldn't have any money for the new quality of life things, which the program was always about. The reason they left it in housing is they knew this was going to be the hardest category for communities, especially a community like that. I'm guessing you haven't had a ton of success building brand new affordable housing units.
So we've got a long way to go before we become.
And so do a lot of communities, you know, that are more rural and don't have a lot of town infrastructure and don't have a lot of town staffing.
And identifying space and open land and so forth.
Yep. So they knew this category was going to be the hardest one for communities to get a handle on. Housing is expensive. It's politically charged. It's red tape. It takes forever. And so they wanted to get every possible tool in the toolbox to help communities build new affordable housing or provide new affordable housing opportunities to their residents. And so that's why they allowed you to do pretty much most activities that they support the creation of affordable housing. You can do it. Some communities use that support verb to hire an affordable housing consultant for the town to really, because it's very hard for volunteers. Housing is a very complicated category. Some communities use that and justify hiring an outside consultant to help them get going on their housing plans.
Can we get a quick definition on support for open space, historical, if we have time? For no, yeah, I'm just wondering, like, so what support means in open space? Can you give an example of that?
Well, it would be anything that is not one of these other four verbs. So
Okay,
any activity that you can think of. So, well, actually, great, this is a good question, because this does lead into one of my examples. I was giving you examples of how to use the chart. So let me give you an example of a project that's not eligible, that I always use, okay? Someone comes to you with an application in the historic society. You have a historic society? Okay.
yes,
They come to you and they say, hey, we want to do a oral history project of our World War II veterans. There's 9 World War II veterans left in Dayton. You know, they're not going to be around forever. We want to hire a professional video company. We want to capture their stories. We want to edit it together, make it into a video, play it on TV, have it at the library, etc. We want to do an oral history project. It's $35,000. We're applying for CPA. Okay, so is that eligible? Well, you go to the chart. Are you acquiring a historic resource? And a historic resource, the definition is a building, structure, vessel, real property, document, or artifact that is on the state register or been deemed by your historic commission to be significant to Dayton. Are you acquiring one of those 6 things? No, you are not. Oh, that's forward here, huh? Actually, I know I did. Okay. Are you preserving, protecting from injury, harm, or destruction, one of those 6 things by doing an oral history project? Or are you rehabilitating one of those 6 things? You are not. It is not eligible for CPA funding. It's actually probably one of these other 2 things. You're either creating something new in the historic category, but what you're really doing, honestly, is that's a support activity. You know, that supports the category of historic preservation. But CPA can't pay for everything related to historic preservation. So that's an example of an activity that I think probably is a support activity. You know, publishing a brochure about all the trails in town, right? Again, you're not acquiring trails, creating trails, preserving trails, or rehabilitating trails. That's supporting people who want to use trails, to have a trail maps, and you have a printing cost of $5,000 to print those up. That wouldn't be an eligible expense. So those are some examples.
So we-
Yeah,
Go
Tom.
ahead. You want me to go? So
Yeah.
Go ahead, you go first. You sure? Just to interject something that turned out to be really kind of happened. Got a new clerk, town clerk. He goes in the vault and finds all the vital records deteriorating in boxes. So he came before us and we were able to qualify him to restore these. And he asked for it like 50 grand.
And how old were those documents?
From the original town founding.
Like 16,
Like
1700?
from the British,
Wow.
started with the
Wow.
British.
Yeah, so actually, believe it or not, documents and artifacts, remember those 6 things in the historic category? It ends with documents and artifacts.
Uh-huh.
The reason documents and artifacts are at the end of the list is they were not part of the original legislation. And that was one of the early amendments. That was before I came to the coalition. I came to the coalition in 2006, but in 2005, I think, the coalition lobbied the legislature, because communities asked for it, to add documents and artifacts as another example of a historic resource that can be acquired, created, preserved with CPA funds. So that's how you did that. That was a preservation project of a historic artifact. We've
Well
had,
received by the-
we've had communities buy old fire engines from the 30s, you know, that used to be in their town that ended up in a private collection. Sharon has a 1938 Comfort. Georgetown, I bring up fire things, we have some firefighters here. Georgetown found one of those hand pumpers that were towed by the horses, you know, in the 1800s. That was used in the Georgetown Fire Department. They bought it out of a barn, a private collection, fixed it up, put it on display. Concord bought a musket that was used in the Battle of Concord Green. We've had great artifacts that have been either acquired or rehabilitated with CPA.
So let me ask you then, two actually going up the questions in time. But my 2 questions are, the first one is, going back to housing for a minute.
Yep.
If we're considering, if we want to look at ways to bring in more affordable housing into the town, for example, I'm going to use the 40B process.
Yep.
Okay, for developers. And we normally might work with Serpent or something like that, at the local level, local, county level. But the town is telling us, look, there's no more funds to work with Serpent this year. We've exhausted all the funding for whatever their contract is. And can they come to us and ask us to allocate for the next year, X amount of dollars to work with Serpent specifically on 40B housing? That's my first question.
Right.
Or public affordable housing. I'll change it, but it may not necessarily be 40B.
Okay.
Okay, because it could be rental housing for seniors, things like that, or expanding one of our developments, or doing other things. Can we allocate dollars for a contract for that? The second one is entirely different, which is, let's use the library as an example. That's an historical building currently, but you made reference to the Department of Interior and the 10 lines, if you will.
Yep.
So if we're looking at something historical and we're gonna allocate dollars to that, and that makes, that's a federal agency, makes reference to federal responsibility, if you will, or federal guidelines. But state guidelines are more intense. So for example, I'm thinking for the access codes for persons with disability. The ADA codes in Massachusetts, in some cases, are stronger than federal code.
Right.
What supersedes what?
Okay, so I'll answer that one first. I always like to answer the second one first. The architectural access codes would trump the federal code, just like you said. But what communities do, and we do this in our town, I live in a little town in North Shore called Boston. You go to the Architectural Access Bureau and we petition them and say, look, we have a building we're restoring. It has these beautiful wooden, undulating handrails on our staircase. You want us to rip those out and put in, steel ones that are 2 inches lower.
So you're asking for variance.
You ask for a waiver. And so, but that would be up to you, that would be up to whoever's in charge of that project for the town to decide, are we gonna have to take these out or can we apply for?
That's what I'm asking, because that's gonna fall.
Yep.
You know?
Yep, so you go and ask for waivers because, the CPA understands that, there would be no point in CPA saying, no, it has to meet this standard, and if it doesn't meet the current codes, then you can't use CPA money. Well, that wouldn't make much sense, right? You still need a building occupancy permit, you still have to adhere to all the other codes, so. Now, the SERPED. So there is a part of CPA called the no supplanting phrase. It's the last line of section 6. And what it says is that CPA money shall never end up in the town's general fund. It was an additional surcharge on top of your regular property taxes. And you can't have CPA money flow into the general fund, nor can you supplant something that is already in the general fund, traditionally the CPA. So if SERPED assesses you a fee for a whole suite of services of $50,000 a year, and the town has done that in the past, and it's for general services, you could not use CPA money for that. But if you had a 40B developer apply to the CPC and say, I need some extra money to make this development work, to make the numbers work, and you wanted SERPED to do an analysis on that as a consultant, specifically for that CPA project, you could absolutely pay an additional fee to SERPED out of your CPA funds to help do that analysis or work with you on that.
So that theoretically could be an incentive to a developer.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we can offer.
And have you had some 40Bs apply in town, or?
We have a couple of 40Bs currently in town that have been there for years.
Right.
But we have another large 40B, which is under consideration. Currently, there's a whole separate aspects of it that, like water and sewage.
Right. So one thing you can do with 40Bs with CPAs, that's sort of out of your control whether that gets built or not, right? That's not anything that that's committee is involved.
There's a lot of stuff going on legally with that right now, separately, but
Yep, but if it does end up getting built and permanent, right? How many units are you talking about?
about 120.
Okay, 120 units, maybe 30 are gonna be affordable and the rest are gonna be market.
Correct, it's a 25%.
Okay. So one thing you can do with CPA funds, Bedford was the first community to do this, is you can go to that developer and you can say, hey, you're gonna give us 30 affordable units, and they're gonna cost 200,000. The rest of your market rate units are gonna cost 400,000. We want to use some CPA money and buy down a couple more units. So instead of having 30 units of affordable, we'll have 32 units or 33 units. And then you use CPA money, which you're creating affordable housing units, And you buy down the difference between what the developer needs for that unit to cover his construction costs and his profit and all that, and the affordable rate, because it's still gonna be sold to an affordable person, there's gonna be revenue there. You buy down the difference, and then you're getting affordable units, more affordable units in town without any new construction. You know, like, the problem with affordable housing is, you know, no one wants it next to them, right? It's not in my backyard, those things. If this is gonna be built anyways, why not turn it into a better asset for the town with more affordable units than the developer is required to do? He's not gonna give you any more than the law requires him to do. But this is a way that, one thing to consider.
So let me take that a step differently then.
Yeah,
Let's assume we've got 120 units, 30 units. When those 30 units are being built, there's no requirement right now for the developer to have to make those units accessible, pre-existing under construction. If those units are purchased while they're being constructed and the person is a wheelchair user, for example, then yes, the developer has a responsibility because the person's met the criteria. Having said that, if the town wanted to approach the developer separately, and say, okay, out of these 30 units, we want 10% of those units or 3 units to be made fully accessible under construction. And we were able to work with the developer through, whatever method to determine what would it be to make those accessible, those 3 accessible units, wheel in, wheel out, doors, thresholds, counters, etc.
right.
Are we able to use the money that way?
Yeah, interesting. I don't think I know the answer to that question.
So, because
when
right
I
now,
get,
you know where I'm going with this.
yeah, I'm a jack of all trades, but master of none. When we get deep into these 4 categories, especially the housing category, I know CPA really well.
Yeah.
But sometimes we get deep into the different categories and I don't know the answer. But we have people that we refer in each of those categories. So there's someone named Shelley Gary at the Mass Housing Partnership.
I know, Shelley.
You know Shelley? Okay, great. Shelley would know the answer to that question. And so when I get a question like that, I introduce the person to Shelley and Shelley takes it from there. So yeah, she's a great resource. All right.
Can I ask one quick one? Because this might be my only chance to ask this. to a
Okay.
Professional. So we approved the park project.
Yep.
Part of the park project was an accessible walkway.
Okay.
Part of the problem with the property is that there is no established parking area.
Okay.
So not to make the project go from this to this and
In terms
keep
of
it,
cost.
the cost down.
Right.
Could Parks and Recreation come back and, because obviously the main focus of the parking area is to make the entire property accessible, would that qualify under, I would say, preserve?
Yeah. Well, no, that would be
Or
rehabilitation.
rehabilitate?
Yeah, rehabilitation actually is a little bit of a misnomer people don't think about. Like if you have a park that is 2 acres and half of it has tennis courts on it, the other half is wooded, and you want to add basketball courts onto the wooded part. People think that is create, but you're not creating any recreational land. That 2 acres is already a park. You are rehabilitating that 2 acres to build those basketball courts. So that's the difference. The create box means you're actually making recreational land where there wasn't one before. Like it wasn't just a general empty lot, and you decided to build a playground. That's creation. So that would be a rehabilitation project. That's sort of one of those gray areas of CPA. CPA clearly is not a fund for parking lots, and the parking lot itself is not recreational in any way, shape, or form. But what the Department of Revenue has said on questions like that is something they call the incidental use concept. If a use would on its own not be allowable, but it's just an incidental expense on a larger project, sometimes that can be okay. So for example, if you were building a brand new park from scratch, and if the CPA law said you could pay for everything but the parking lot, well, the park can't open without a parking lot, right? So if the park is $250,000 and the parking lot is $20,000, DOR says that's an incidental expense as part of a larger project. But when the parking lot in and of itself is the project, that can be a little trickier. In this case, since you did appropriate money for the bigger project, I think that could easily be justified as an addendum on that.
Okay.
But if that park had been there forever and you wanted to apply for $20,000 just to do parking lot improvements there, that really is not a recreational project.
Okay.
That makes
That
sense.
makes perfect
And
sense.
that word incidental, is there a percentage value or anything that dictates?
There is not. As a matter of fact, it's not even, it's an informal opinion from DOR, that what they call the incidental use permit. But DOR long ago stopped even putting things in writing. So there you go. And that's, one of the things about CPA is they actually never wrote regulations on CPA, which is probably a good thing. Would you have voted for a voluntary tax increase if there was a 700-page manual of red tape that says, here's how the state's going to regulate how you spend your voluntary tax increase? No one
So there's a
would
lot of
vote for that.
representation to be had there.
Right, there is, and that's why they consider it to be a local program.
So, Stu,
Yes.
do you have a resource that a legal person in there, or do we need to get let's say we got into something,
Yep,
and maybe the town council, maybe couldn't handle it, or do you have legal people?
we do not have any legal help.
So we have to hire,
You would have to, yes. So normally boards or committees in a town cannot hire their own legal help. You usually have to go through the selectman or the town manager to get permission to do that. You could use your administrative fund if it's an expense that the committee wanted to do, something for them, something for you guys about CPA. And you asked if you could hire a special counsel, you could do that.
reason I ask is like, I'm not saying there's anything going on, but like the planning board has a council, zoning has a council, somebody thought we had a lawyer.
Right.
And we don't, we're just regular folks.
Right, but you can always ask the town manager or the selectman to have access. to
Yeah,
town
yeah,
council.
I'm just saying, we got
And-
this gentleman. that-
Yeah,
that
Um,
engaged.
yep,
In most cases, the TA will check with the town's general counsel, and then the town's general counsel, based on their expertise
Right.
or not, will advise the TA as to whether or not we need to retain separate counsel.
Right.
Area, and then the allocation of dollars has to be approved by the board of selectmen.
That's why, that you said.
So,
With the administrative fund being 500, you get a lawyer, before you know it, you're gonna deplete that pretty quickly.
it's hard, yeah, I mean, you allocate a flat amount of 5,000 for your administrative, but
Right.
actually could allow a little bit more if you went to the full 5%, you might want to consider that
That's
next spring.
something we're looking at, we're gonna be doing some restructuring.
Yep.
And because we're gonna start fresh.
Yep.
And try to get some stuff.
So you wouldn't be able to do that till next.
I don't mean, I don't mean this week.
But when you do your budget for FY '24 next spring, you might want to calculate what the 5% is and ask town meeting if
Just-
you can appropriate that, just in case you need it. Yep. So we're winding down here. There is nothing in the CPA legislation that says exactly who can and cannot apply for funding, but some general guidelines, sort of best practices. These are the two largest applicants usually, town departments and private organizations that are in town. We do get other applications from folks, but you just want to look at those very carefully. If you have a loosely organized organization, like a neighborhood association or something that's not incorporated, it's really hard to give them public money. Like, who do you write the check to? There's no structure there. There's no real organization there. So that's definitely a caution. Sometimes people who own really significant historic homes might apply for funding. There's nothing that says you can't do that, just, urge some caution there. There's, you're using public money, there has to be public benefit to that. And do you really want to be at a town meeting debating whether to give Mrs. Johnson $5,000 for her historic roof? That's just something to consider. And then the other one that gets tricky is privately owned commercial historic buildings. Sometimes in downtown areas, you'll see that really beautiful historic buildings, but they're privately owned. And sometimes the owners don't have the money to, keep the facade looking great. And you could do that, but you probably want to protect the public's investment of public money in a building like that. And the way you would do that is you would get a preservation restriction on that building in return. So if you did provide them some money to do a facade improvement on their historic building and bring it back to its former glory, you would get a restriction on that building so that you would have that forever.
Some historical commission, for example, has a house in Center Street.
Mhm.
Where they keep all the archives, records, et cetera, et facade because of leaking.
Right.
With it, I'm assuming based on what you're telling me, that's a public building, public space, open to the public.
Right.
They could come to us.
Yes, except there is a prohibition in CPA, there's a lot in that 70 pages, that you can never do maintenance with CPA funds. No maintenance or operating.
So repairing a roof that is leaking
If you are,
or replacing,
if you are, there's a definition of maintenance in section 2, and there's a definition of a capital improvement in section 2. CPA is a capital improvement program, so if it met the definition of a capital improvement, it would be okay. If it met the definition of maintenance, it would not. In general, with the roof, if you just have to fix certain pieces of it that are leaking, that's maintenance. If you were doing an entirely new roof, that's probably a capital improvement, so that would probably be okay. But the nuance is, the devil's in the details of exactly what that project needs and those two definitions. But those are really good definitions to look at. You can never do maintenance or operating expenses, and there is a definition of that. It's not as useful as the capital improvement definition. That one's really good. It's making an alteration that is designed to be there for an indefinite period of time, fixed to the property, and in such a way that it would actually harm the property if you took it off. So, you know,
more likely,
temporary things aren't, you know, movable things, temporary things are never eligible for CPA funds. It's really for capital improvements to buildings and land, things like that. You folks pretty much know, but for the new folks, you know, how does a project happen? People submit applications. You guys review it. I always encourage you to leave plenty of time to do your due diligence. Sometimes you really have to dig into a project. You have to go back and forth with the applicant. You might have to bring in an outside consultant or call Shelley for a question on a housing thing. Leave yourself plenty of time in your process to do your reviews. You make your recommendation votes, and then town meeting has to approve everything that you do.
Can a project include an engineering study or not?
Absolutely, yeah. Usually, that's a great way to do big projects, is they come to CPA and they get a phase 1 appropriation, which is all the soft costs, you know, the feasibility study, the engineering, the design, the bidding, you know, or cost estimating, all that. And then they do all that work. Sometimes it takes a year, and then they come back with the actual request for the capital construction cost. We've already talked about this. This is talking about the building structure, vessel, real property, document, or artifact that's on the state register, etc. One last thing I want to talk about, I think this is it. Whenever you acquire something with CPA funds, whenever you buy something, it has to be permanently restricted to the category for which you bought it. CPA is a voluntary additional tax, and they wanted to make sure, and it's a restricted fund, and they wanted to make sure that communities used it for just those 4 things. So, you know, for example, if you had a piece of land coming up and the selectmen or the finance committee said, you know what, we're going to need a new school on the west side of town. That's the fastest growing area. You know, I don't know if it'll be 10 years or 20 years, but we're going to need to build another elementary school. There's this beautiful piece of open space available there. Let's get CPA to buy it for open space purposes. We'll park it there. We won't do anything with it. But if we ever need it for a school, we'll transfer control from the Conservation Commission to the school board, and we'll build a school. Well, that's not what CPA is for. It's a restricted fund. So if you bought that piece of open space, you would have to put a permanent conservation restriction on that land forever, keeping it only for conservation purposes. Same thing if you bought a park, piece of land for a park. Same thing if you bought a piece of land for housing, or if you bought a historic building, which that is not too common. And that restriction has to be held by someone other than the town. Because that job of that organization is to watch what the town does and make sure they're not, you know, doing something inappropriate with that land. So if you bought a piece of open space, you would, you know, find a land trust that would hold that restriction. Or the state holds sometimes conservation restrictions. So this concept is really important. The state has, you know, gives you a little time to do this. It's a lot of paperwork, and you have to get the state to approve that restriction. But they have started now asking when communities apply for state grants, environmental grants, they look through your projects and say, hey, we want to make sure that we've done all your CPA restrictions, if you bought anything with CPA funds. And they're starting to really be more active on limiting those grants to only communities that have done their past projects. So we always like to have people just look through your acquisitions from the past and make sure that that T was crossed and that I was dotted. I just looked quickly in the state database. These were the only acquisitions I saw. I don't know much about these projects, but if these were actually pieces of land that you bought, you would want to make sure that there is a restriction. That's.
Yeah, the one's hanging, the boat ramp thing,
Yep,
that's still hanging, the herring run thing, that's done, and the Rugio is done.
and who holds,
Herring run was, well, Tim was doing it, well, I don't, I'm still going through all the old records, but
right,
I know the Rugio thing was, Tim handled that, but he was still the chairman.
was that buying an APR?
There was something up there that there was something.
Yeah, you definitely want to check into those.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
Brook Street was an old herring run that they restored.
There was another piece of
Right.
land up where on the Sunset line.
Yeah, that was up by Pleasant. Oh, there was another piece.
Was
that's
on the
right.
other side, like when I asked.
We'll have to look into
That
it.
was purchased with CPA funds too?
I'm not
They were
sure if
looking into
did
it, I don't know if they
If they actually did it, yeah.
I mean, own that land and who's asking.
He didn't, we don't think he bought that. But I think what happened was, we're trying to develop a new process where we can, if they don't start using this money within a certain amount of time, we gotta go back to town meeting and try to get it back. We got a lot of stuff hanging out there, they call encumbrances.
Yeah.
That Dave is working on really, he's doing a great amount of work. on
Cleaning
that.
those up, yeah, that's great.
So we're trying to clean that up, and
Yeah.
that's another thing that's hanging.
Have a little sympathy in that municipal projects do take a long time. I mean, it's not like we call a contractor and hire someone for our own home. They do take, sometimes years, but, there's a limit too.
I believe Mike did send you
It's been
along
3
some-
years,
Stu, Mike had sent you along some stuff to let you know.
Yeah.
Kind of bring you up to speed where we're at.
The other one, like, on College, Sunset Line.
Yeah, that was the marsh, they were gonna do something with that.
Yeah, that was a valuable piece.
So that's what I have for you tonight. Hope that was helpful. I'll stay if there are any other questions and
But we sure do thank you. Alon.
No, Thank
No
you.
problem.
Great information.
hope that makes a little longer meeting for you tonight, but,
It's okay. We appreciate
Thank
it. We-
Is the PowerPoint available or no?
well, we transferred it onto that computer. so maybe
Okay,
you wanna
what I'll do, I'll make a copy and give it out to the members.
Yeah,
Okay, if you don't mind. I know some people like to keep it too.
yeah, and if you have any problems with that, just email me and I'll send another copy.
All right. No, thank you. That was a great presentation.
Yeah, that's.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, appreciate it. Always enjoyed working down in this part of the state. It's just a beautiful part of the
It
state
is.
and exactly the type of, town that should have CPA, to really help preserve your town. As that open space comes up and, the quality of life issues,
Just as an aside, if you ever, I've done lobbying for years in the state house, and I said that because if you're ever walking the halls and knocking on the doors, and you need local communities to help reach out, let us know, maybe we can. Walk the halls.
well, ironic you say that. You may get an email from us tomorrow morning.
Oh, about that.
Asking you to contact your legislator to urge them to do something this weekend with that 20 million. We're talking to our sponsors, right in the morning and ask them if that would be helpful. So you may get that email
Who would
tomorrow.
that be going to, you know, specifically?
Like,
Well,
that, people-
Everyone, I'm pretty sure I do have all your email address. Did you get our newsletter? Did everyone get our newsletter?
I do.
I'm new though.
Okay, let me, can I pass on a quick paper? If you can
Yeah,
write
Of
their
course you
name down.
can, yeah.
We'll make sure that we have everyone on our roster.
Can I ask you one more quick question before? we
Yeah,
take off while
absolutely.
we're doing this?
Okay,
So when a project, and this is more of an opinion of yours, when a project's presented to us,
Uh-huh.
like in my mind, and I'm new to CPC, I've only been on for a few months, but I've been part of the process. When a application comes before a committee, the way I think about it is it eligible and do we have the money priority wise to fund this project? How critical should the committee be on the actual design of a project?
Very critical.
Okay.
So, sometimes people get hung up on the eligibility, whether it's legal or not. Sometimes there's a lot of back and forth, and you have to call us or ask your town lawyer or whatever. And then you get to the end, and it's determined it's legal, and then everyone thinks, okay, we're gonna do it, right? Well, that just qualifies the project to be considered, right? You have a very limited amount of money, you know, for all it's good. So you really do have to look closely at these projects, and your job is not just to look and see if it's legal or not, and if you have the money, you give it to them. It's really to prioritize the project and to make it better, to add some value to it. I mean, you're the stewards of this money. You can't spend it yourself, still have to go to town meeting for appropriation. But you guys are the stewards of that money, and it's a very limited source. So in any way that you can look through it and add the things you've learned in doing that CPA plan and talking to all the other boards and committees and the knowledge you have of the town, that's the role of the CPC, to get that project as good as possible to go to town meeting. And that's why it's so critical to have those applications come in, you know, early in the fall and leave yourself, you know, a good 3 months to really work on those applications, do your due diligence and make them better, make them bulletproof, and dig into them.
We used to, in the past, they would take the summer off, but I mean, due to all the, a lot of companies right away. Could we operate all year long if
Most
they wanted to?
Most CPCs do. Usually there's tons of work to do, you know,
Now that we have a new,
yeah, after town meeting, you're getting ready for next year's cycle, you might want to make some tweaks to what you're doing, change the dates a little bit, update your applications. That might be a good time to have your public hearing, you know, when it's not so crazy. The spring is a terrible time to do it, everyone's crazy getting ready for town meeting. But most CPCs do meet, you know, once a month throughout the school year.
looking at.
Another question
Yeah,
about our process. We're in the digital age.
Yep.
Okay, and I got screamed and yelled at about this, like, it's my park project, that we need, and 10 hard paper copies.
right.
Is that a state thing, or is that decided?
As a matter of fact, CPA says nothing about the application.
That's what I
process.
said, that's what I thought.
CPA starts at the point where it says, the Community Preservation Committee shall make recommendations to the legislative body, town meeting, for the acquisition, creation, preservation of open space, whatever. That's where it starts. So everything before that is completely up to you. It doesn't even say you have to have applications, although everyone has turned CPA into an application program.
Okay.
But that process, you know, what that application asks for, how they turn it in, what the timetable, what the deadline is, how many rounds of funding you do, you know, that is all up to your committee.
So we can create flexibilities or
Absolutely.
or
And
process
all new
within
people,
us.
This is a great time to dig into
That's
that
why we're
process.
trying, that's what we're working on. But you gotta realize, just to go in the past, it's like the good old days of how it was. It was always done that way.
Right.
So
And this gentleman got the.
Have you question,
have you
Ken?
said-
There are some communities, there are
I was
some
gonna say, my
communities
question
out-
to Ken is, does this answer make you feel better or worse?
Takes them further, I don't know anymore.
So the
It makes me feel better.
So then my question.
Maybe that's phone.
My question then related to this a little bit.
Yeah.
Is bylaws.
Uh-huh.
If we make changes, I'm assuming if we have bylaws, I haven't seen them yet. But I'm new.
There is a bylaw that created this committee, but I
Right.
think you'll find it's very generic.
Yeah, the bylaw just is the adoption and the percentage.
Right.
No, that was your ballot question.
Okay,
There is, it's actually on our website. If you go to find your way to information on individual communities, we actually gathered the bylaw or the ordinance that creates this committee for every single town.
So you have our bylaw up there.
Yes.
I don't know, it's just a copy of the Mass General statement.
Yeah, it's usually very, very generic, and you do not have to, those local procedures that you make at the committee level, those do not have to be in the bylaws. No one puts those in the bylaw. All right. That's just a vote, you talk about it, you memorialize it on a piece of paper, you vote on it. If next year there's a whole new committee and they want to change some things, they change it. So that's completely up to
And
you.
it doesn't have to be approved by board select.
Absolutely not. No, it's completely up to you. You guys have actually, a CPC is actually more authority and control than most town.
It's quite obvious.
Yeah, there's very few
You
boards,
don't see.
there's very few boards where town meeting can't vote on something unless the board says it's okay. Like, I honestly can't, even the finance committee is usually advised, because they make recommendations. But I can't really, I don't know, maybe the school committee, is it possible that, that they have to say yes to the school budget before the town meeting?
Well,
votes
they
on it?
are autonomous, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, the school committee budget still goes to town meeting and board of selectmen and the FinCom thumbs up, thumbs down.
right, but that's, it can still go to town meeting if they vote thumbs down, so. Yeah, and the reason that is if you're dealing with a voluntary tax increase, the rest of the tax base, citizens didn't have they don't have a say whether they pay their taxes or not. They want to keep their property, they pay their taxes, but this was a voluntary one, so that's why they vested the power in the people on the committee. And that-
That's the people's money.
Yes, absolutely. So pass that around, I'll.
Thank you so
Who
much.
has that piece of paper?
I think it's back to you, sir. It's on your,
Oh,
Okay, great, excellent.
no, thank you for coming again. We
Yeah, thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much.
So appreciative.
Thank you.
Did somebody get my email?
Oh,
Oh, we'll get it.
yeah. You want,
Oh.
you want your town one?
That was great.
Okay, well, we'll be in super,
All right,
Can I
hopefully you
get-
can get your email.
I will have to get that cleaned up.
Yeah, sometimes it goes through, sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes I get it, so I know, I'm gonna try to work on that town email.
Right. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. You need any help back now?
No, I'm good.
Do you have
Dave
your
here
thumb
took
drive
it.
and do you have your clicker?
I
from the
do.
back? Okay, just want to make sure.
Drive?
All right, does anybody need a little break to go to the bathroom, or they good? Let's go on to the next,
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you for your patience with me. It's been a
well,
long.
go ahead, let's take a couple minute recess if somebody wants. to.
Good luck tomorrow.
Yeah.
Just let us know though, seriously, we'll help you out.
Okay,
Okay, safe drive.
thank you so much.
All right, take care now.
Thank you so much. That was actually, that was my first. You had the old one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
So while we're taking a quick 2 minutes, I'm gonna grab this stuff, this file.
But it's even more informative, but through it.
How it changes and evolves, yeah.
It's pretty
Good
much
stuff.
the same as everything, but it's fascinating.
We went through quite a bit.
Well, was it Monday night? We
They're
had to
gone.
go- Tuesday night, I had to go to the election one tonight.
Yeah, yeah.
I had to go through-
Oh, how was that?
Dave, can you hear me?
Excellent, I mean, they, went through.
They still looking for people?
That I don't know.
I saw the setup, it was nice. Yeah.
This,
I think Dave dropped off.
They changed the laws, right? Again,
what they, no, you know.
what the clerk said, they changed the laws again.
Well, no, they were like election workers. what we
Oh,
had.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that's all the same. And it was, we knew what we were doing anyway, but this fascinating, just 2 straight hours.
That's something, huh?
And, when you think about all there is to it, he's clerk, where they have to go.
That's
through.
a tough job.
Oh, I knew it was anyway, but,
It's really intense.
Yeah, and like, as his work is like, you can't shut the crap down.
It's
I know.
tough to get you folks to come in. all the time.
Yeah,
COVID kind of did that too.
some, after COVID, we do some that, we used to.
That was really educational, I like that.
Is that-
The candy? What do you think so far? You gonna do it?
No.
Oh, you don't wanna do nothing? You don't wanna do it now?
No.
Are you serious? You don't wanna do it?
No, of course I'm not.
All right, all right.
Seems very interesting. Yes, I think I can do it.
Thank you, Bill.
We'll discuss it next month.
Yes. We're both.
But you guys gotta meet.
Right.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right, well, we knew you were coming, but then we found out he's coming and
And
then.
it's great because.
Too bad you couldn't, but I know you could.
Well, no, it's great because Bill and I were just kind of, we weren't sure over that last meeting. and we were-
I sent Adele a Facebook message and we
Exactly, yeah.
Robbie,
Mhm.
because it was like, we didn't know. We
Well,
didn't
you know
want
why,
to
we were
miss
at Firecracker and she says, I wanna come back, and then he came forward.
So
I didn't say
the
I
board has to vote on it,
You would come back, that's right.
but yes,
Why
I will,
And you had a deal.
I will do it.
Was that,
We bought you a shirt.
Yes.
we did.
Anyhow, it'll work
I
out.
don't-
We'll discuss it next month.
Yes,
Well, nothing to discuss.
Yep.
Just to get the approval of the board.
yeah, we have
And
to,
you can, once you get approved, you can just come in, you're all
yeah,
set.
he has to be sworn in, go down, sworn
Yeah, once the town swears you in, you just come
in, you
here.
know, but that will do that next meeting, so you will be here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Works for me.
Good
You're gonna
seeing
be a
you.
fantastic addition.
I'll be back.
It's been a long time.
It's a long, long time.
Matter of fact, I remember the last time, I think I said we had Chow Mein at Candace, I think. Is that- You remember those days?
Chow mein and
For a dollar, for a dollar a
Tip,
minute.
right?
That's when
Big canal.
And this is just.
Oh, yeah, I'm a big fan of
Like
Chow
for
Mein.
this,
Oh, what, tell me?
you're not, you don't
Was
have
it
to be like a
this far
stenographer,
Charlie?
so like that whole thing, like we handle it, but,
Okay.
you know.
It's the same
Yeah, I
thing.
just didn't know.
It's the same
Yeah.
stuff from the Oriental.
Yeah.
Chow Mein.
In the minutes,
Follow the
like
chow mein
literally,
is
we
one
just
thing.
put, you know, Stewart saying.
Oh,
They
yeah.
had the noodles on the farm, look like they-
That's how we did it.
Yeah, we used to
Yeah,
do rules from
that's the first time I know
16th,
you've done this, the sewer,
9th
but-
Street.
Yeah, from the Oriental, yeah, a little bit.
And we used to get all the pictures of the fire station, do it, make us up.
Yeah, and you gotta know this stuff. I was in there, but you were going.
Yeah, you don't need to
I
put all
felt
that in
like
there,
I
'cause, like,
walked
the
back
really
before
important
the-
stuff, just
So
the
Nothing
slow
has changed.
motion seconds
Nothing,
and that
because
stuff.
they
Other
don't,
than that,
it's
oh yeah.
before, they have a little machine, or like, oh,
It's
but
not-
how-
Same family, yeah.
Yeah, this will come in handy.
Oh, yeah, maybe that's the
Yeah.
next night when you came back.
I would say that that's,
Nice.
you know, everybody does them a little. bit
Dollar a
different,
man.
but, you know,
Okay.
you feel free to do
I'll see you
it
next
however
month,
you're
Bill,
comfortable
and thank
doing
you
it.
so much.
Good seeing you.
So usually what we do is like, I like to do, so what we do is, I like to do it in a Word doc, because it's the most accessible.
He's got-
Prior to the next meeting, email it to all of us. Once we approve it, then you just forward it to the town clerk. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
No,
that's great.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just a reminder, we're still being
All right,
recorded.
let's roll.
The new
Okay.
website.
They dropped off and said thank you.
Okay.
But we're gonna keep it
Is
going. so we
anybody else
keep-
out there?
No, but we're gonna keep it going while we finish up.
Yeah, which, yeah, we'll have to.
All right, let's get going back on track. Basically, what we're looking at, we got through that, we want to review and discuss an act about the new laptop and printer. It was actually brought up by Dave, which is good. He asked the town administrator, we were talking about it. And like you mentioned, the warranty shop, you know, it's a good idea, and she can get started fresh. And we just need to approve the money. Well,
Do we have a quote?
we can not yet, but I'm just.
No, I'll have to look for a quote, but basically what I heard, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, that it comes out of our account from CPC.
Yeah, professional.
So I found out in the past, that sometimes when you buy equipment through the town hall, it's a lot higher. If we buy it ourselves, it's cheaper, but then you gotta try to get, basically get your money back from the town if you do that.
Well, I will say I've never, if I find a couple things I've purchased on my own credit card, I've gotten paid back within a couple weeks.
That should be.
The only thing we would potentially need, if we're purchasing something on our own car or something, is the town's FIP number, so that there's no sales tax.
I have that too. I got a 501c form, so
It's incredible. I do this all the time for cars. It's not incredibly difficult. It is quite the process. So typically, if you want to purchase something, and you can do it by writing submitting a bill to the accountant, is you need to do a purchase order and then provide your tax exempt certificate. I mean, it can be done, but it's like, if we're talking about, if we're gonna save $50 to,
well, it's not worth it.
it's not worth it, then that's like,
So what's the better way to do it?
well, I think we need to at least get a number from what, like, if we have, let's say, just for WB Mason. If they sell
The
it.
town, yeah.
No, they do, because we
Yeah.
bought some stuff.
So say,
before.
WB Mason says it's gonna be, this laptop's 1,000, this printer's 500, and then we go on, a different website, and it's, 30% cheaper, then maybe we have that discussion, but we certainly don't. I don't
You
want
want
to purchasing on anything without a number.
Let me look at, see what I can do for you, and I'll talk to the accountant. What size screen you looking for? Does it matter?
No.
Okay. It's better to get you something brand new, because I know the other lady we had before had all sorts of problems with that laptop, and
Yeah,
brought it in for repairs a couple of times. I read this afternoon, you know?
Something with a webcam too, just in case.
Yeah, good point, yeah.
COVID happens and we're all going.
Yeah,
from
yeah,
home
go
again.
through that again. All
So
right.
I
So,
have-
so what do you say, I think just to cover it formally, which is what I think we should do. I am going to make a motion that we ask Dave to do some research and come up with an approximate figure for what he believes with his background and expertise would be the fair cost for a laptop and a printer. Very often they're packaged as well, I'm sure he knows. And come back to us at the next meeting with an approximate figure and recommendation as to what he thinks would be the best pricing for us to get.
There's a second. I mean, do you have any input?
The only other-
I'll second the motion.
Do you have any problem with it?
Just give me a little time, I'll try to get it done. The only other problem we're gonna have is, we're gonna look at the Microsoft 365. Now, usually the town has an account. Sometimes they get kind of not like to give it out. If not, I think we can purchase 2019, which is almost like Office 365. So I'll look into that part of it. You like Office, right?
Yep.
I think everybody loves dealing with Word and everything, with, you know, Microsoft, and trying to go to Google Sheets and all that.
Yeah.
Okay,
I do have a quick dump, you have a computer that you use in the sewer.
Yep.
Office right now. I guess this would be a question for Mike, but if say producing today's minutes, is it a matter of like you stay an extra half hour and
Right, type it up.
I think that's like the logistics of, as far as, you know,
what do you mean, far as?
if you say you work 9 to 5 for sewer, and then obviously she'll need to like not so much clock in, clock out. but
Well,
the other
whatever
half of the
time she
payroll.
has with us goes on a separate sheet, she'll track her hours.
Well, and I just want to make sure it's okay to stay in this, for you to stay in the
Right.
sewer office and do this work from that computer. So that might be a question to ask Mike.
Well, the
Okay.
union
This is a little bit uncharted
I
territory.
think the
Yeah.
union, if that's okay. the union. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was designed to work with the union, that's why it was offered that way. And I think there's a 2-page thing about all their duties and everything, so I think it's been voted on, this whole thing.
Yeah,
So,
so,
so there's a motion,
Yeah, the motion was,
I second
I
it.
can't repeat the whole thing, but
the motion was seconded.
it was seconded, so let's take a vote, unless somebody has to hear it again, I think it's pretty much.
no, we're good. We're gonna start with,
Dave?
aye,
And you're all your.
Aye.
Aye.
And myself and I, so it's unanimous.
and like I said, Dave's offline, so just.
Dave's gone, so he would be just not here. Okay. Review and discuss an act of payment of coalition invoices. The same thing we paid last time it went up. It's $875. We put it into the town account, and it's paid. Basically.
Yeah, and this supports the.
This is
state
the thing that we
control.
pay, this is, the dues used to be cheaper, but they went up like everything else, and that's what we pay.
So didn't,
We've always paid it.
didn't Stu make some reference to $5,000 in the town case?
No, that was what we allocate each year. This is a
That's our budget.
fluctuating,
Okay, well, that's right, this is the okay.
and it's a voluntary.
We traditionally pay every, since they.
I would like to make a motion that we pay the Community Preservation Coalition dues for 2023 in the amount of $875.
I'll second it, Jonathan Gale.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Oh, any discussion? It's contract. Dave Martin?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
That's 2 ayes, for myself as an aye, so it's unanimous. Next. Review and discuss and act, this is reorganization of committee.
So this is the one that I asked you for last time.
No problem, I did it.
So, I'm glad it's on there, thank you very much. I'm gonna make a suggestion and then, I'm not gonna make- well, I'll make a motion. We have to have a motion to second it, I will explain my motion at that point, because I can't until it's made. My motion is gonna be that we already have a clerk. So, thank you very much, by the way. Thank you, made clerk, so we don't need to have that. So in terms of reorganization, I'm gonna recommend, and my motion is that, gentlemen on the finance person.
Dave Eckerson, yeah.
That Dave Eckerson be the financial person specifically for the CPC. That you be the vice chair of the CPC. And that Kevin Smith Jr. be the chair of the CPC. So that is my motion. I can't discuss it or say why I think this is a good idea unless there's a second.
I'd like to have further discussion.
It's gotta be seconded first. If second is not approving the motion, if you can't.
I don't have to accept I actually don't have to accept the way
No, you don't, and it can be
as
amended.
the chairman.
No, but you have to accept the motion. You have no choice.
I believe I do have a motion.
If
No,
somebody, if some,
no, I'm just saying, I've been reading Cushing's.
right, if somebody's,
And-
but it can be seconded. The motion has to be seconded.
If it's not seconded,
I'm gonna second the motion, so we can go into discussion,
That's
so we
fine.
can further
That's
talk
fine.
about it. That's all I'm gonna say.
That's
Second the motion, so we get it on the table.
So
Thank
I totally agree.
So let me, and that's all I was looking for, right, so that I would be clear on that. And let me explain where I'm coming from, so that I don't want there to be any animosity or anything.
There isn't.
of that nature. I think, first of all, we know the financial person and what he does and what he represents and what he brings to it. And I think that we need to keep that continuity to that. The reason I'm suggesting it this way is primarily a couple of things. Number one, what you bring, Tom, to all of us, especially somebody like me who is new. And this is very, very clear with students here, frankly. You bring a world of expertise and background and knowledge from your years of doing this. And other things that you remember that I wasn't even a member of town at that time before, going forward and how things evolve and how things come about. So I think that that's valuable. And I'm not just saying this for sake of it. I mean that truthfully. I think it's enormously valuable. I think the reason I recommended Kevin as the chair is primarily because with all the stuff that we're going to be dealing with and going on, that's going to be coming up, and I foresee a lot of things coming before us that are technically more involved and more in the weeds than perhaps have even been done in recent years. There's going to be a lot of email going back and forth, a lot of things going back and forth with the state, with Mike, perhaps with all of us, with the folks in the library, with other things that are going to be amazingly time sensitive, have to be done on email and have to be done in certain matters. I don't know, and I don't know what you have in terms of resources to be able to do those things in the way that they have to be done. I know that Kevin has the resource and the ability to do that at his disposal instantly all the time. So my feeling is that if you're vice chair, you guys are going to have to work together either way.
Well,
You're gonna have to, let me finish, you're gonna have to communicate, you're gonna have to work together. Clearly, if Kevin isn't at the meeting, you can't be here, you're gonna be the acting chair for those meetings and so forth. But I think everything you offer to us, everything that you've done and everything that you've worked on, including, by the way, what you've taken over recently and everything you've done has been yeoman's work. But I think for the purposes of streamlining everything, that this is the way I think we need to have that. I'm not diminishing anything that you do at all, so that's all I have to say. I just want to be very
okay,
clear.
we're still in discussion. We're done. Here's what I gotta say about it. I had a meeting with the town administrator. And I can share it because I've been very transparent the whole time. As a matter of fact, I've taken a lot of hits for it because I put it right out there. And you know what we've been through. Number one, I didn't work this hard. I was humbly asked to stay in that position. I understand where you're coming from. I now have a new administrative clerk. Nothing against Kevin, he's young, he's energetic, he's knowledgeable. He's also, just like I mentioned to you, I said, do you want to be the chairman? He said, no, I got too many hats. I also feel he has too many hats, and I think it's easy to burn out. I now have a new administrative clerk that's all spelled out in here. I had talked with some of the members that I wanted to try it a little while. with the new clerk, I think it's gonna take a lot of pressure off everybody. Because if you look at her, what the town, it's something. I mean, you could actually change the title of this to, and what I like about it is the chain of command. All right, there's a lot of stuff, and I don't want to get into politics, but I wish we could leave the politics at the door. Because a lot of things have been going on. I got called into the town administrator, the chairman of the board of selectmen, they wanted to make sure I was told, do what you feel you want to do. They're not telling me I gotta get out of that position, that it's too much. I got this young lady in here, the only thing I serve on, open space, I brought it up when I went in there, I thought he should be the chairman of open space. Dan, I said, you should be the chairman of the BDIC, which we serve on together, because I knew I was gonna be the chairman of the CPC. And some people that left told me, you can't do too many chairmanships, Tom, there's too much to do. So I really like doing what I'm doing. I'm retired, I enjoy it. And I put a lot into it, and I took a lot of hits for it. But we did push it through, and it wasn't easy. I'm not saying this young man didn't go through a lot either. But I'd like to try it for a little longer. I mean, I'm good for another year.
Well, I think there's a misconception that you feel like
I feel like you're pushing me out.
people want you
No.
off of the
That's to be
committee.
honest, it's actually.
We are so incredibly thankful for not only your input, but your time. All the stuff is thankful. I mean, it's a thankless job. It doesn't matter what committee you're on. We know that. I think you're valuable to the commission, to this committee, because of the level of care that you have for the community and the desire to improve it. But I think the utmost importance of any committee or commission in this town is the ability to communicate. And I don't know if it's because of a lack of technology, whether it be a computer or whatever, but we had an extremely hard time even organizing this meeting tonight. And that's not the clerk's job either. The job of the chair is to
But
organize these meetings.
I think
And
there's
I just-
politics involved in it.
I don't think there's any politics whatsoever. It's extremely hard. So again, am I busy? Yes, I'm extremely busy. But it would have been a lot easier knowing 3 weeks ago that I was meeting on July 28th and bouncing back, emails
Well,
between.
Kevin, there
us
were
and Stu.
times when you sent me a message and said, I forgot what day it is, I forgot what week it is, so the open space is not gonna meet. What I'm trying to tell you is, people have told me that are professionals, that if you get too many hats, I don't care what you do.
Well, I'll say
You're gonna burn out.
it here because we're being recorded. I haven't done it yet. I am going to issue a letter of resignation to open space because it's not something that I'm extremely passionate about. I got dragged into it by former selectman Zagrafis because we thought it was gonna tie hand in hand with Parks and Recreation. And that's part of the problem. And I'll be honest with you, I'm on it with both of you. And also,
Well, how about this?
is that I need to kick something off my plate. That's the thing that's coming off my plate.
So Tom, let me say to add on,
Go
to
ahead.
Kevin, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm on cable and I've been like the acting chair for many years. And now I just lost 2 people. And I'll be honest with you, I feel like Kevin, if it gets too much, I might have to drop out of CPC.
You had mentioned that.
And so if you drop out and I'm gonna drop out later, it's gonna affect the committee. So you still be co-chair, you still take the meetings. Because he's not gonna make every meeting. I mean, things come up, family or other issues, I think you did a hell of a job during the year. The thing is, you deserve a break. We want you on the committee,
I just wanted to try it. with the-
I'm not what I said, look, I don't have politics in the game. Okay? I've only been a resident of this town for not even quite 6 years. Right? I don't know you, I don't know your background. Yes, you can say Kevin and I know each other and we're on something else together, and that is true.
Let's not.
But, let me finish. Kevin and I, for what it's worth, on a lot of matters that we work on, even ADA related, different things, disagreed. We agreed to disagree, is the way I put it, okay? And it works out amicably. It's not politics and politics. I'm honestly throwing the thought that I put out there out specifically because of the way things are gonna be coming down. A lot of things are gonna go through. You're right. You do have a new enormously, I'm sure, ahead of time, correct about that. But you can't put the onus to get everything done and out, and the way it has to be communicated to all of us on the clerk. It
I'm not.
can't-
I'm
it
telling
can't-
you that
It can't happen. I don't know if you have a computer at home or not. Everything that you send comes through your phone. I don't know. Okay, you need to have this kind of access for all of these things instantly. You need to be able to communicate the things to us instantly. You can't have somebody else doing it. And if you can't do that, those are the issues that I'm concerned about. I have to listen to things. I need things to
I'm
happen.
with you.
So, you know, if somebody sends a paper 3 days before that has a bunch of stuff on it and it's not accessible to me, what am I gonna do? I can't go to you and say, make it accessible. You're gonna have to go back to the town, to the selectman's office and say, make it accessible for Jonathan. I can't do that. I can't work that way.
Well, that's like, even just for example, the original email with the tonight's agenda was sent in a PDF format, and then Leanne, because she knows well, went ahead and re-forwarded it to us in Word docs, so Jonathan could
So
read
that
it.
I can do it. So this is just an example of things, I'm not speaking for myself.
That's fine.
This is my self-interest, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Well, that's fine. We understand.
But you have probably, I don't know how long some of the other folks here have been on CPC, but what I know is hearing what you said, as I said to Stu, hearing what you said, it to me, you offer an enormous amount. I would hate to
Oh,
have
no,
this approved, and then you say, well, I'm resigning.
no, no, no.
I'm losing a valuable voice.
Well, and think of it this way, it's not like we're trying to kick you out of your seat, it's more of an opportunity, no, it's not, it's an opportunity to divide and conquer. Having
Exactly. I think
a
it's
chairman who is, or, it's not, how is it political?
Well, let me explain it to you.
Well, let me just finish my piece, is, you know, I have the benefit of being good with communication, using technology to get all the information out there. And then you have your knowledge, having been on this and sharing it for a year. So let's work together and make it all work, not Tom, you know, sit in the corner while I play without you. That's not what happened. That's not what happened.
No, I
here at
believe,
all.
here's my feeling on this. This is a unique outfit of people. Even if you're new, it's a different dynamic. I came on board, Tim, Woody was still here.
That's the
I know it's in the past, but you learn from your experience. Now, I don't feel it's fair to the people that aren't here to make. So, wouldn't it be better to table it and have everybody else make sure they're here to talk
Are
about
we
it?
gonna table this till October and we're in the midst of?
No, we're gonna
making
meet in
proposals?
August. They
You know-
want us to meet in August again because they want us to finish
I
the
don't,
summer.
I can't see, we've dragged this on already. a
Well,
couple of
I'd
times.
like to entertain a motion to table it, and you know what, we can talk all night, but I think it's political.
So what you would have to do is amend the motion.
I mean, I think I worked hard and I fought hard, I think I deserve a little consideration to just.
We have, and you said this in the last meeting, and then the lack of communication
Because
leading up
it's
to this.
political.
No, the lack of communication leading up to this meeting was extremely difficult to get through.
Because I've got people going behind. They're not using the chain of command. Everything's supposed to go through the chairman. I got called
Well-
into that office, that timeout. I got called into that office and was told, Tom, everything's supposed to go through the chairman. I've had two documented cases where somebody has written agendas and put them into the clerk, and I didn't have any idea what was on. This is behind the chairman, going around the chairman. So one meeting I canceled. The other one I went in and amended it. Because, not because of what was on it, but because you didn't follow the chain of command.
Because
Would
you
you tolerate
didn't,
that?
you didn't respond to us, and Mike Mullin sent you an email directly. Tom, respectfully, we tried to go through you, and we've been trying to reach you for 3 weeks, and you
I don't
replied
agree with
in the emails with nothing but
I
nonsense.
don't want to,
But Tom,
So
there's
you're
other
making
things
it
going on, and
political.
I think it's political.
So Tom, separately, let me make a comment and then in terms of your motion.
I don't mind.
Okay, so the first.
All right.
That's an example, was that we, at the last meeting, asked you to provide information to us within 7 days into all of us by email so that we could follow what rules.
Can I say something?
No, I'm still talking.
Well, you go ahead, but I'm the chairman.
But we didn't get anything from you, nothing, so I sent.
You got it one day late because of, is that what you were, you
No,
you
no,
forced that onto
No,
us.
no, there was no force.
Yeah, but who does that? Because I saw what was going on with that.
Separately, here's my comment. If you want to make.
I'm not playing this
If
political.
you want to make a motion to have this continue to the next meeting, you have to amend my motion. If you amend my motion and then somebody seconds it, we can vote. If you amend the motion and nobody votes on that, we can't.
If I entertain a motion to table, that's the end of it. If somebody
It has
would
to be seconded.
That's right. But I feel, this is just my opinion. You know how this works.
I do. You can make.
And I feel really strongly that,
This is, look, I think,
I don't,
this is, Tom, this.
I would be willing to step back
Tom,
as a regular member.
this is
to be honest
not
with you.
about you.
No, I'm not saying it's about me. It's always about a team with me because that's how I was trained. That's how I learned from the fire service, the
You know what,
military.
but don't.
There's no I in team. It's not about me.
Please don't lose sight of one thing, okay? Which is, you're using the word team. Well, you know what? How many times have you already said in the past? When I first came here, even as a visitor, and the couple times I've been here, we're putting together a really good team.
Exactly.
Okay, you're still part of that really good team.
But I feel that I should make the decision when I want to go, not be pushed. I feel like you're pushing me out.
No, I am not.
That's just how I
I
feel.
will tell you, my motion made was not to push you
But
out.
that's just how I
I'm
feel.
sorry.
I'm telling you how I
I
feel.
understand, and I respect your feeling. That's why I'm trying to explain it as much as I am, because I have respect for your feelings.
Maybe because I'm from Ohio, I'm a little thick. I don't know.
It's not personal, it's not political.
Well,
If you want to amend.
you know, I've had people tell me, I'm not
It's-
running
I
again for
think
this and
it's-
that, and they turn around and do, they screw
That's
you.
totally different.
If you would like to make an amendment to the motion, I suggest.
Well, I
think
can't
we
make
all
an
just
amendment.
have-
Yes, you can.
We
Yes,
just-
you can make an amendment, see if somebody seconds it.
I think we all just have a desire here to move forward in a more structured format.
You have the ability right now, chairman or anybody here, to make an amendment and see if somebody will second it. If they do, then we have that, then we can discuss it or take it for a vote on the amendment first. If it doesn't get seconded, then we go back to the original motion and vote. But yes, you do have the ability to do that. If you want to table it, it has to be.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I'd like to bring up a discussion, it was part of your motion, but you just kind of mentioned it. And you said you want to continue that, but I think, and it's got brought up with the ASPC here. There's no clear definition. That's kind of this nebulous official type. So I think that's also something we need.
Financial officer.
What exactly are we asking of him, or what takes that along? The CPA coalition, is always part of the email exchange, a month or so that talks about the accounting officer. Quote, maintains official financial records, but they don't, it's kind of unclear whether the accounting officer is a member of this committee, whether it's the town accountant. And at the end of the day, the town, quote, is responsible, but who's responsible, who does what, who's responsible for reporting, all that kind of stuff. And are we asking Dave Epperson to take care of this for us? Are we asking him to be our liaison for the town to take care of this for us? So I'd like to have some understanding to what people are thinking, what exactly is that role?
Dan, we were thinking actually in an informal discussion, I believe Kevin was part of it, of assigning a stipend, which I did check into that can be done for him. And he did express when we had the meeting with the accountant, that he wanted to be, what they term, he'd like to make it the financial officer. And I suggested that we might, as Kevin brought it up, that we might assign a stipend to him, and we do have the money, and we can still pay the clerk. And I found out that we could take it out of our budget, and would be legal, so he would be, but he's really good at it.
But I feel like kind of responsibility.
It just came from this is, once again, I understand it's racks your brain. I came on board from a discussion in a hallway coming out of a selectmen's meeting to join CPA, and they said I was the financial clerk. That's something they've done since it started. I don't know. Maybe Woody could answer it. Maybe Tim could answer it. I don't know.
I think the financial clerk is more of the liaison to work with the town administrator and the town accountant.
the nature of our report.
Yes.
You just need it.
From what I read in that documentation that we sent back and forth is, it's the responsibility of the town accountant. But what we want to do is keep our own records and almost reconcile what we have versus what they have and make sure it's accurate.
So in essence, then that makes that person the liaison. if you will.
And that's what he's doing now, in a sense. He just doesn't have an official title in.
Well, again, because there's nothing, we don't have anything.
And that's
official
part of
about
what
the
we're
committee.
trying to work with the town administrator. We had a meeting. Let's start fresh, let's reorganize, let's upgrade, let's get some of the stuff, blah, 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 you know, the whole 9 yards. But I guess maybe it's somewhat personal, but I'm kind of very, I went through a lot where I was like, you know, I'm like, God, you know what I mean? Maybe I'm just not ready to let go of it because I wanted to try it with the new, you know what I mean? I just feel like I'm not ready to go yet. It could just be an emotional thing. Because I know that I took something personally, because it is personal to me. But somebody says, oh, it's not personal. But you know, it is personal to me because I do this we all do it as volunteers because we want to do it. And it really does mean a lot to me, and I'm not ready to let go of it yet. But then again, I'm not, you know, I'd like to I know I keep bumping it down the road, but I don't want to go back. I would rather go back to a regular member than go to vice chairman. I don't want to be vice chairman. And I don't want to quit because I'm not a quitter. Because if I was a quitter, I would have quit back when we were fighting it out. And, you know what I mean? But I didn't.
I proposed vice chairman in my motion. Because I suspect there will be times when Kevin will be able to be here because of other commitments, whether it's on another committee or commission or family or whatever it is. And somebody needs to be able to run the meetings and knows what they're doing. So that's why I proposed you as vice chair, okay? If you are vice chair, you can determine to what extent you want that vice chair responsibility to be with Kevin. Between you and he, you would have a conversation.
Well, can I turn down vice chair? I don't want to.
You can say I don't want to be vice chair, but I'm just telling you, I offer that because I have a lot of respect for who you are, what you've done, what you brought here. Okay, let me make that clear. If you turn it down and say you want to withdraw your name as vice chair, I will remake my motion.
I personally,
But I'm also going to say I hope you will stay on if that's the case.
I would rather stay on as a regular member, but I personally am not ready to, you know, I don't think, well, you know, I know what's going on. You
Do
know
you
what I
want
mean?
me to amend my motion?
If you want to amend it,
I don't think you need to. I
to
think
be
you can
honest
just-
with you,
you
I
can
don't want
decline
to be
the-
vice chairman.
You can just decline the position.
I could decline being vice chair. I mean,
Okay.
I was gonna, like I said, Dave did mention to me that he wanted to turf the vice chair off to somebody else, and I'm not the one.
Well, if you want to, you can resign from that or say I'm not accepting that.
Well, I'll just say I don't want to accept that.
Right, and then somebody else, if we have a vice chair, and somebody else can be, you know.
Who wants to be vice chair that's here? We don't have some people missing.
Whatever it is, I know, so we can, you know,
And you want to do a little research about exactly what you want to make?
do you want to amend a motion in any way, or
Well, I can amend it apparently.
you can amend it?
I'd like someone else to do it.
My preference, and maybe it's just a, that was just that tree vote.
That's what I want to hear.
Chair, vice chair, clerk, and the formal finance officer.
So do you want me, would you ask me to withdraw my motion then?
I would, and then start back with Mr. Jefferson, and I'll be here, but, you know.
He dropped off.
But we can still.
Yeah,
make-
and, and clerk, and then make a final decision.
I have to say one last thing before you make up your mind. You've been through a lot in the last year. You picked up a lot of things. I will say you were very good during the meeting when we had Stuart here. You were well advised. I think a co-chair would be great. You still be sharing the power. You still be working.
It's not about the powerful thing.
Well, I won't say power, but it'd just be like you'd be on top with Kevin, what's going on. I really think you should think this out because there's a lot of co-chairs that do just as much work as the regular chair.
I'm not interested in that.
All right, I just thought it was great working with you and I think you came a long way and I think it's a great
Remember when we
opportunity.
started back when
Oh, I know.
Tim's brother was on?
But since we're going backwards now a little bit.
Let's take the time to
For
read.
the clerk, for your minutes, I am going to withdraw the motion that I made. And I'm going to make a motion, first of all, a new motion, so I'm withdrawing the motion that I made. And then I'm going to make a separate motion that Mr. Eckerson, assuming he accepts the responsibility, be appointed as our financial liaison with the town administrator and the town accountant. That's my first motion. For a second.
That makes sense. Any discussion on that? And I think it's pretty clear that that's his desire from discussions we had in public or not with the town accountant. Now she's gone, so they have an interim accountant, but he did get a lot of stuff from her. We did discuss also with Mr. Mullen that it is legal to give him a stipend. You just have to decide what you want to give. And that's not a big deal. It's all legal. You can take it out of
Right.
the money.
Yeah.
So I think that just gives the guy a little extra pin money.
Well,
and-
I think that's a separate.
Yeah, I know. I'm just, it's, are we in a discussion though?
It's a fair point, and that's why you should consider being co-chair.
I just don't want it.
I understand, but we're on this motion right now. So
All right,
we
well-
second it. Oh, we can move the motion. No, yes.
You can move it, but
Well, this is only for just the base.
Dave,
This is for Dave
I
right
don't
now.
have a problem moving that. I'm sure that he'll be fine with it.
Suggest we take a vote.
Go ahead and vote. Dave?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
And I agree. So it's unanimous. That's basically what he wanted to do anyhow, and I think to get it all in written down would be great. Go ahead.
And before you make your next motion, the responsibility of clerk, if we have a clerk, above and beyond the fact that we actually have her for you.
Well, she's considered an administrative clerk. by the way.
So we don't have to.
We don't have to have a clerk like we do in other committees.
She's now what they call an administrative clerk, and it was voted on, this is the document that was voted on, because only one person applied. So we didn't really even have to do interviews.
Yeah.
So it's nice, it's all with the union, you've got it cut and dry, it's been approved. It's all set. I think it's gonna be smooth sailing with that.
I think we're good.
My next motion, which some may agree or disagree with, I understand that fully, is that we appoint Kevin Smith Jr. as the chairperson of the CPC effective after tonight's meeting.
That's it.
Motion made second.
Is there
Any discussion? I just don't agree with it. Philosophically, I don't agree with that at all. I just don't agree with it. That's where I'm at. And I think also, I believe it's a political, shake your head, do a dance, whatever you want to say.
You
I've
obviously,
been in this town long enough, I can't believe it, but here we are, once again. And this may sound funny, but did you check with Woody before you did this? And that's a little bit of humor. It's sad though, but that's where we're at. So that's just a little humor.
Just so that you are clear, I haven't discussed my thoughts with anyone. and I wanna be-
Well, I didn't say you did,
I understand that, but I want to be really clear about that. okay?
but I also feel, sir, and nothing, I think the rule of it. Because as soon as you came available here, I said, this is not what an asset. But I also feel, and it doesn't matter at this point. But I've always told the truth, I've been transparent. And I've been feeling the push. And I don't think it's fair to someone that worked like that, hard and stuck their head out, neck out. And I understand, Dayton or any town, not necessarily Dayton. But let me tell you something. There's politics involved. And, go ahead. And I know you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. I don't think it's-
I didn't say that.
I think it was as a joke.
No. I just see, I do see, yeah, a little facetious, but
No.
to try to lower
No,
the,
it's nobody connection.
no, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But No, you can leave him out of it.
Let me say something. Look, I'm, as the ADA coordinator and the chair of the ADA commission and so forth, okay? They've only had this kind of position that I'm doing in both ways. Really had it actively doing what I'm doing for a couple of years. I know what it's like personally to fight uphill, fight that human fight. I know with the town and with people who agree or disagree. But I know, you've heard at town meeting when it's come up for discussions with people like ADA, how people feel. Some people say it's great, we need it, other people say, who cares, do we need to spend the money, do we need this, do we need that, why do we need this, why do we need that? I totally get it. But I also understand that in order for me to do the things that I do, even as the ADA coordinator through the commission, I have to keep the politics out of it all, or I can't do it. It's that simple. And that's the same approach I'm taking here. The politics for me are out of it. It's what we can accomplish with the resources we have and the people we have. And you're one of the people who bring an enormous amount of resources to the committee. So that's why I made the motion to make it from here that you don't frankly, which I wish you did. But the politics.
I'm bouncing around in my head.
But the politics for me are not.
What about ethics? What about ethics?
Ethics to me are really important too. I'm not saying.
Very important
I
to me.
think you have a lot of ethics, but I also know that I do. My ethics are strong.
And I
as yours.
respect what you do, and I know your ethics.
And I think that's what you and I are learning, Tom, a little bit about each other, is that we have a lot of respect, ethics for what each other brings to the table. And I'm hoping you can understand where I'm coming from, that this is not what this is about.
I didn't say it.
Okay, but
I didn't say it was you.
I understand, but it's not me at all, so I want to make it clear. So I made a motion, I don't know if anybody else, who was seconded, anybody else has anything to say?
I just want to add one thing, is at the end of the day, I don't like to point, I'm gonna defend myself. Don't point the finger at me
Oh, open that can of worms.
and
pal.
say that it's political, because
Oh, I know for a fact.
it's not political. If you see anything that I've done in this town, one, I don't hold it as Kevin did this.
Time out.
It's always
Go ahead and
me.
finish.
It's always we. I talk about the Parks Commission as we
Mm-hmm.
all the time. Everything I do is a team. I don't run around saying I did this, I did that. It's not political for me at all. I have a genuine desire to help improve my town. That's why I got involved with Parks and Rec, because I was sick and tired of dealing with stuff that was out of my control at a national level, when I wanted to make a difference in the town that I live in, so that my kids would have, a good future in this town. This isn't political for me. I'm about as genuine as it comes. The amount of hours I put into Parks and Rec that I receive no pay for, I don't. There's a lot of behind the scenes things that I do that I don't ask for credit for, and I never would. I even had this conversation with Mike the other day, just to air out some stuff that we talked about, this like paid positions with the committees. I said I understand that it's within our laws and this is the way we've always done it. I said and you can ask Mr. Moore.
No.
And I said to him, I said, I would never ask to get paid for Parks and Rec. Like, I have no problem whatsoever volunteering for that position. But I said, it's funny that we have paid positions in these other committees where the workload isn't as much as what Parks and Rec is. Parks and Rec is like running a little business, between the accounting part of it.
Exactly.
And holding meetings and stuff like that. So I don't appreciate the fact that he is.
Well, I'll tell you what. I happen to know for a fact that a state, this is ethics also, and chain of command. And you know what I'm saying? A statement is made. It's nothing personal, but we want to just have them step back. It's nothing personal. Well, it's personal to me. And that's out of your mouth.
It's not personal. I think you're a great person. I
No,
think
I'm
you're a
talking
great-
about it's not personal, but it was already out there that this was all laid out ahead of time. So, is that really the way you do business?
Yes, because you.
So you're full
blocked our
of it, you're
desire.
full of it then.
No, I'm not full of it. I had this conversation with
You're
you.
contradicting your
I
own
had,
stuff.
I had,
I've heard this.
I had a conversation with you post-meeting after the last meeting, because you wouldn't let us discuss reorganization, and I told you what I did with Parks and Rec, is you still give the committee the opportunity to make the decision. You can't withdraw that and take, it's a committee.
Well, when somebody's
And it
working
should be
behind the
decided by-
scenes, going around the chairman, of course you're gonna get sandbagged, gaslighted, whatever you wanna
Listen.
call it. This is just another bag, this is a bag job, man.
It's not a bad job.
It's a bag job.
I'm gonna, Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna propose that we move the question.
Well, I've said just about how I feel about it. But see, however it falls, I'm always gonna be me. I'm gonna tell the truth. I have very high standards when it comes to ethics. And I do look into things. I do a lot of work behind the scenes. Maybe I'm not that organized, but that is just a small thing that can be overcome. I'm gonna be 65, so what? That's nothing. That's nothing nowadays. And what we went through, no, I know things that are going on. I had a meeting and I was told, that's up to you, Tom. That's up to you.
I will say that if you think.
I'll go down fighting and I'll come back up fighting.
It's true.
But I am not gonna stand, I'm totally against it. Whatever you vote is fine, I'll accept it, but I'm telling you.
Mr. Chairman, before this
I'm not done right,
I'm
dude.
just gonna simply
I know
say
for a
before-
fact, nothing against you, I got facts about this. I'll go to the ethics commission.
Mr. Chairman, before this gets put to a vote, I'm simply gonna make one comment, which is if you think that anyone in this room,
I'll go to the ethics.
regardless of how anyone votes in this room, if you think that anyone in this room doesn't have respect and understanding for everything that you've dealt with in the last year, and all the stuff you put up with, and all the things that were going back and forth, and the language, and all the arguments, things, you are absolutely wrong. Every single person in this room.
And was I not totally in
Listen,
control
no,
of
what I
myself?
said to you is everyone in this room. has
Jonathan.
respect for what you've done.
Ethics.
This is not. about
Ethics. It is for me. When I know facts, I'll go to the ethics.
I know
commission.
exactly what you're speaking
Do
of.
whatever you want to do.
So.
Do whatever you want to do.
I'm asking you to please move the question for a vote.
Can I-
Go ahead, Dan.
And it's not particular to this commission, really, but, so my role of the chairperson is at a bare minimum, organize the meeting, run the meeting. Everything else that happens, I know that 99% of the time, because there aren't other people stepping forward, responsibilities fall to the chairperson.
Always, you're
And that's a
responsible.
choice.
Yeah, I know.
That's a choice
Yeah.
because it can be easily distributed. So really, the responsibility of the chairperson is simply organizing the meeting, calling it to order, conducting it, and working away. Everything else they do is optional.
But we didn't have
I
any.
know, but I know.
Yeah.
but,
It's not fair to me.
So those organizational skills that you mentioned are actually very important. And, it was frustrating, like for this meeting, getting it all put together.
How long have you been on here?
No, I'm saying, about meetings in general. I do think that the role of the chairperson, their organizational skills are, of considerable importance.
This is a unique operation,
I just want to.
Okay. but I want to tell you what. I know, I'm telling you, ethics for me, do whatever you want. But I'll tell you what. I don't agree with it. I feel there's been chain of command, all kinds of stuff going on. I know how it works. But I'm just telling you the truth. I know that it's bullshit, man. I'm sorry. I hate to say that word. I think it's a freaking bad job.
It's not a back job. We're being zoomed and we're.
Well,
I'll be
hey,
open and honest with
whatever, you wanna go?
I'm asking you to please move the question for a vote.
I'm just telling you, I'll have to go. I'm kicking it around in my head. I don't want to be vice chair. I saw this coming anyhow, this push. And people had mentioned different things about it without mentioning. So here we
I
are.
have one more motion to make, so I'm gonna ask you to please move.
Is there any more discussion? Can you repeat your motion?
Did you?
Yes, there was the point, Kevin, chairman.
Can you have a second?
Yeah.
All right, you want to take a vote? I'll take a vote.
Tim, Tom, I respect you a lot, but I agree that we need Kevin to be the chair. The co-chair still out there if you want it, I understand you don't, so
Thanks.
I'm putting the vote, I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. You
It's
see
nothing
what-
against you personally, so.
But I'll tell you what, I still know some things. That's fine. You play it any way you want to play it. Dave, you're aye. Dan? Mr. Aye. It's Gail.
Yes.
Aye. All right. I'm gonna abstain. Don't have to vote. Okay, no problem.
Now I'm still going to make another motion, which I'm gonna ask you to really think about for a minute.
Don't put vice chairman.
That's what I was gonna do. And I can make the motion, it can be seconded, and you can probably get it on it. So I am gonna make the motion that you, as the former chair, be appointed as vice chair, serve in all capacities as the chair, if he's unable to fulfill them for any reason at any time, or to chair any meetings, he's unable to do that. So I need a second for the rest.
You got a second on that? Dave Marvel.
Any discussion?
My discussion is that I think you would be good.
I apologize, I'm not interested in that. I will go back to a regular member, but I do not want to be vice chairman. I'll go back to a regular member, I got another year. I'll stay on as an at-large member if it pleases the group, because it is about all the different puzzle pieces fit together. But I don't want to be the vice chair. Anyone else wants to grab it, because I don't want it. I just don't want it. My personal feeling, I don't want to be vice.
To withdraw the motion.
If that's what you gotta do, because I don't want to be vice chairman, I refuse.
Then I will withdraw the motion. You know, if you, everyone not here. What their thoughts are.
Well, that's the interest on here.
Why, I wish I could have had. Doesn't, I guess, it ain't gonna work that way.
I just, and I ran into Mr. Digglesleeve in town hall, and he's more worried, more concerned about enjoying himself and
Well, this is some,
replanting chestnut trees, which is great. That-
Sounds like Jim.
Yeah, because even tonight, he's like, he was coming back from Boston, wasn't sure if he was gonna make it in time, because he was, a little tough to communicate with through email as well, and he's like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna leave. He's not like, he wants to do his part to, represent his committee, but he's not open.
well, he's
Not
busy with
on his behalf.
conservation.
Yeah, well, yeah, conservation interest in keeping it.
No, because cable's too much for me right now. I appreciate it, but
It's a lot.
Well, actually, it's really only. Organize the agenda, that will get organized. A function of the meeting itself, nothing outside the meeting. And only to the extent that Kevin's not doing it. Really, that's the limitation of it, it's a minimal role.
But it's still.
Oh, I agree, I agree.
Well, yeah, we want to just have an open discussion.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I have a question addressed to me?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll take it. That's okay, that helps.
It's fine with me.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
No, that's fine.
All right, I appreciate you stepping up.
So I can make that motion. And then we can get a second in that discussion, I guess, and that would be that Mr. Pruitt. I would nominate Mr. Pruitt as the vice chair to serve in whatever capacity he and the chairman serve fit, which includes running any meetings when the chairman is not able to, and working with the chairman on any other activities of the CPC that they both deem necessary for the job. Well, it's a function of that job, yeah. Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any more discussion? Thanks for stepping up. Usually.
Well, you've been a long sitting member, correct?
About a year.
Yeah, so I think it is helpful to have a little bit more insight. Yes, rather follow several.
Take a vote.
do a roll call vote. Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'll vote, yeah, aye. Unanimous. There you go, you ready? All right, what else we got? Oh, minutes. Review, discuss, and act to approve the minutes, accept the minutes.
I did have the fortunate ability to listen to the minutes. They're very good. So I will make a motion. Anybody who wants to hear what they sound like, totally monotone voice, I'm happy to have somebody. You can put you to sleep, but I can't put to sleep. But I will make a motion that we accept the minutes of June 30,
6:30,
2022.
I'll second that motion for the minutes. That's Dave Martin.
Now, in the sewer department, we have a section where everybody signs it, that'd be,
No, I mean, once it's voted on and recorded, that's all we need, and we can submit it as is to the town clerk.
all those in favor? Dave? Dan?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Aye. And myself as well. Okay, future meeting date. Apparently, from what I understand, that, I don't know what your feelings are about August. We're going through the whole summer, might as well meet in August.
Be the third Thursday would be the 18th.
Okay.
Go back to just that consistent.
You're gonna go.
We will be on Zoom just in case, is that right?
I think we'll always have this.
We'll have Zoom at least through March at this point.
And also thinking about just running it all year long, something that you might want to think about.
That's a good point.
Which the Stu had mentioned that a lot of them are running. I know it's up to the people, because Mr. Digit, even myself, I mean, I knew we had a meet, but it's hard, the summer is hard. I think Dave, you can attest to that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Even for my meeting, for the APA commission, I asked the members, we meet next week, and I said, look, I'm not gonna be here the following week, everybody can be here, because we don't have any members. We wouldn't have a quorum.
Right.
We have members.
And you gotta realize this, you have to have 5 for a quorum. With this outfit, you have to have 5. Some you can have 3. This one you gotta have 5.
Does
So
the quorum have to be a presence quorum, or can it include Zoom?
you can do
So
so.
Zoom until the March deadline.
March deadline, that's right.
It had to be present, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the state's regulations.
By then COVID will be back again, so.
There's actually proposal. By the end of this month, again, legislature, to keep the hybrid version permanent by law. But as opposed to governors, he's like, that more.
Yeah.
It's a big help when they do that, though, really.
Because it encourages more people to participate. in
Definitely.
other ways. So, because it's gonna be Zoom, I don't know if I will physically be here, I might be there, I might be kids.
Yeah.
Then 18th works for me.
In the discussion, I'm just trying to think about who Ferguson dropped off. It just wasn't, is there anyone else, anybody else?
Does that work for you?
No, I think you got them all.
Okay,
Just
so,
actually, when is the next housing meeting?
Third weekend of August, we'll be on that. Builders.
yeah, he pretty much,
Yeah, do you know what day of the week it is? Oh, so he could be here on this thing. So we'll be sure to touch base with Robbie and get his email and all his contact information. I was like.
I wonder if even this language order, we could, conference call with that, because I know that different people that maybe there's absolutely what
Why do you have
Once
any-
you assign it, then it's left to have to point it.
No, not for,
No, he can
not
come
not as a
direct.
representative.
No, we have,
how many you have on that?
What else?
Yeah, just only the at-large members need to be approved by the board of selectmen.
So he could just
How many
come,
do you need?
you can just, yeah, but and then he goes to,
get sworn.
do you need it before?
Well, he's already sworn in as part of the housing authority, correct? He doesn't need to get sworn.
So he can just come,
Because it's.
and he can vote.
Yes. Yeah, the representative positions are a little different. than the at-large.
Are you gonna meet before that? No.
No, so we'll be the
The
2
same
days
day.
after, so.
Oh, okay.
Or the 18th?
I think he's looking for it.
Okay. Yes,
I think he's a very good fit.
Oh, he's good.
He's a nice man, very
And Elizabeth, does the third Thursday work out for you? Okay,
Oh, yeah.
great.
Should probably, yeah.
We should check, you know.
No, that's fine.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, it's a good thing you asked them.
We're all on the
So you know
same
you have
page.
five- I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I know you know you have 5 plus the at-large, which gives you 9. Right? So we have all the different boards.
Yep.
And then 4, I believe at-large, 4, correct? It gives you 9.
Oh, no, leave it.
I always thought you were cable, but you're actually at-large.
At large, yeah, cable don't count.
And then that's kind of sad. Counts a lot for a lot of people. Okay, so basically, I guess we're squared away on the date. And, any public input? Please tell me that.
We'll double check.
Dan, you're on.
No,
Everything good?
we're good.
All right, does anybody have anything else? I'm good.
I don't have nothing to add.
Don't make me cry.
Number
What's that?
one.
Oh, I'm not gonna resign. I said I
I
just want to
understand
go.
that, but I'm making that clear in this meeting.
You wanna make a motion?
No, I meant.
If it helps,
you only-
No,
No, I want to say it.
But what I will do is make a motion formally, thanking you for everything that you
I appreciate
and everything you put up with in the
No,
past.
it's fine.
Especially in the past year, and all the changes that you've had to deal with, and all the things that you've almost had to quell riots from.
Well, it
and all
was-
that
it
sort of
wasn't
stuff,
that bad.
Because it takes a lot of work to do that, and you've made every single possible effort to do the very best you can, and I don't want to go back to go unnoticed.
I appreciate that.
Can I say something?
But I like, it's a good thing she was sitting next to me, because she
So
took,
if there's a second on that, and then we can discuss.
oh,
Now you can talk.
go ahead, discussion.
The playground really meant a lot to me.
That was
And
good.
I just wanted to say, when you went out and printed all those copies and you dropped them off to everybody's house, I was so impressed.
Well, that's,
Because my son goes, who was that? Because you're knocking on the door, you're
Yeah, I
knocking on
know.
my son's door and Teddy. My kid goes, who's that? Who's that guy? I
That's
go,
just
oh,
Tom.
he's the chairman. He goes, oh, he was very passionate. He goes, make sure your dad gets these things and,
well,
you
we
know.
just didn't want to let it, because if we wouldn't have hand delivered that stuff, it would have failed.
No, I
I
knew
mean,
that.
I was
but-
all by myself, and I knew it was a good
But you took
thing.
a great initiative, making sure that everybody's got everything for that meeting. And thank you again. For that.
Yeah, it's fine.
I wanna say that
I'm not
too,
going anywhere.
because,
We kind of got it close.
Yeah, and you put up with a lot.
I know,
Just
that's,
scrolling through it all and stuff like that, but you know what? Take the pressure off.
Well, you know,
Now you got,
we talked, you know,
yeah, no, you put up. the-
but I do want you to
I don't know
understand,
how you did, but.
well, I did it because I had my wife, a lot of support at home. It's just like, I would never run for selectman.
I had the pleasure of meeting,
She met the family, which was nice.
yeah, and
Um,
lovely family, and I don't know.
I'll put it this way, I've been approached for a lot of things, and I like to leave it up to myself. And I really, I was kicking it around, but I just didn't wanna. That's why I had to verbalize it, when you're a chairman and you're out there and you start looking into things, I was also a fire investigator. It was part of my job, and I used to work with the state police. And I know how just seem to find things out for some reason. It's almost like people just tell you, you know what I mean, you're sitting next to somebody.
I'm glad you're staying on, though. even though
Oh, no, I
I'm
wouldn't,
chair.
no, is that what they
Okay.
usually do, is
I'm
resign? Like if you don't get to stay, is that what people do, they just quit, I'm not a
No, it's
quitter.
retirement fine,
No, I don't quit, you know me.
but I'm so glad you're gonna stay on the front, because you value.
Well, no, I know that, I just don't, it's my personal
Yeah.
feeling that when you do that much, you know, I just,
Well, I made a motion, thanking you for everything you brought to it and that you will bring to it. So since you're the chairman,
that's
you're
fine.
still the chairman, I'm gonna use the word final act as chairman. Can that question?
Don't say fine.
Okay.
It's not fine.
Final act, yeah.
I would
The,
just
uh,
need to move that
That's
question.
so final saying that.
Okay, the last act you have this evening,
Well, no, do you want us, what do you need, a second?
no, it was seconded,
And we're still talking, or we done?
we're done, but you just need to move the question.
David,
What?
take a vote.
Aye.
Aye. myself, of course, I appreciate it. But it's fine, it's just, you know, it's a great little group. We work together for a while.
Yeah, it's for Kevin is, not to do all of the work. Come in and say, yeah, you're
I'm still alive. When we,
feel free to like.
That's fine.
review.
But now that we have, thank heavens, we have somebody, and I think,
breath of fresh air.
I hear nothing but good things, I think it's gonna be great. I wish we didn't know, but that's what's part of my plan. We wanted to try to get somebody. I did agree with the union, because I do support the union, whether you like unions or not. I think it's gonna be a great thing. Plus, it gives you a lot of, it protects you also, which I think is excellent. And I support that, because we're moving forward from the past, forget about the past, we're moving forward.
In my past,
And other things, I'll tell you. Go ahead.
in my past life, I was actually the vice president of NAIC, which is the National Association of.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
For many, many years. And I made that a good representative.
That's good.
So, yeah, I appreciate it.
I thought you were gonna say you used to hang around with Jimmy Hawker.
Well, just to reply quickly,
You know where he-
I love to give homework. It's like my number one action is to. Well, I think it makes us all better. One thing to hand out a piece of paper, it's another thing to have, ask to go look at it. You're gonna stumble upon things that I would never see, vice versa. So I always like to say, hey, can you, this.
So you try and find the missing paperwork in the basement.
Exactly. Yeah,
You can find some extra missing paperwork in my basement.
he's got his stuff
There's
mixed up
still
with
CPC
everything
stuff
mixed
mixed
up.
up with
I just found the Lincoln Village beautiful presentation.
Oh, can I make a motion that we,
Yeah.
in the meeting, so I can kill that recording?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So,
Well, we didn't say anything that was.
no, everything's great.
Good night, Cable.
There you go.
Thanks, everybody, and
Would it take a second to adjourn?
I enjoyed it.
All in favor?
Aye. I enjoyed it. I still enjoy it, so I mean, I'll just go down to back to at large.